I was reincarnated as the daughter of Severus and Lily. The original story is in Spanish, so there might be some translational discrepancies. It wasn't possible to add an English audio track to the original video due to the difference in duration. In short, a seemingly orphaned girl in Ireland recovers the memories of her past life. She realizes she chose to be born into the wizarding world of Harry Potter, as it was where she had the best chance of survival. However, things won't be easy. Businesses in the train cars. Celine floated silently through the skies, camouflaged by her stealth, as she made her way to the train station. The cool breeze caressed her face. The system asked me some questions. Could I obtain a fragment of a universal energy crystal by exchanging it for a philosopher's stone? The system replied, no. You would need a philosopher's stone of 2,500 to 3,750 cubic meters to get a fragment of 0.0625 millimeters and 2 millimeters. Celine couldn't process that and asked for a visual reference. The system told her it would be like exchanging an Olympic-sized swimming pool for a grain of sand. And her mind was too preoccupied with what she had just heard from the system. Celine, incredulously. An Olympic-sized swimming pool. For a grain of sand? Are you telling me I'd have to gather a ridiculous amount of philosopher's stone just to get something so minuscule? System, neutral, as always. Correct. Universal energy is extremely dense and valuable. Its production or transformation requires overwhelming amounts of magical resources. That is why only advanced civilizations or extremely powerful users managed to manipulate it. Celine, sighing as she spins in the air. Of course, because everything in this world has to be so complicated. It's not like I have an alchemy factory at my disposal. Although, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, you say. If I got a bigger space and enough materials, maybe I could do something long-term. System. It's a viable project, but it would require years of planning and resources. Your current level is not sufficient. Celine, sarcastically. Thanks for reminding me, system. You're as encouraging as ever. Upon landing near the station, Celine hid behind a wall to observe the bustle of wizards and muggles passing through the area. Her gaze fell upon the entrance to platform 9 3/4. She couldn't buy her wand yet, at least not officially. But she had her own methods. Celine, thinking aloud. If the system won't let me exchange for universal energy, I should at least make use of what I already have. System, could I buy a custom wand or something using the galleons I borrowed from the Potter Vault? System. Yes, you can acquire a wand through the interdimensional market. However, remember that these wands will not be bound to the traditional or physical nature of this world. Their behavior will depend on your magical abilities and your affinity with their components. Celine, smiling. Perfect. I always wanted something more unique than the standard options. Do it, system. Find something worthwhile. The system opened a catalogue in her magical vision, showing her wand options with fascinating descriptions: cores of interdimensional phoenix feathers, wood from trees that grew in chaotic dimensions, and even combinations that included threads of magical crystal. Celine felt a thrill as she scrolled through the options. Celine. Well, let's see what my first unofficial wand will be. Something that might surprise Hogwarts. While reviewing her shopping options, Celine asked the system, if someone were to gather a philosopher's stone equivalent to all the water in the world, how many sand-sized fragments, or even larger ones, could they obtain? The system replied, it is estimated that there are approximately 1.386 billion cubic kilometer, of water on Earth. To convert this to cubic meters, we multiply by 1 billion, 10 to the power of 9 colon 1.386 by 10 to the power of 18 cubic meter. That's equivalent to 554 quadrillion 400 trillion swimming pools. That equivalent in sand would be 5.544 by 10 to the power of 14 volumes of sand, which would be roughly equivalent to 554.4 cubic kilometers, like a large lake or even a small country. Celine stopped halfway through the interdimensional market options screen. The numbers the system had just displayed left her speechless. She needed a moment to process what she had just heard. Celine, blinking incredulously. Wait. Are you telling me that if someone managed to gather a philosopher's stone the volume of all the water on Earth, all they would get would be like any other lake, practically? Not even anything bigger than normally expected? System: calm, as always. Correct. The conversion of physical resources to universal energy is highly inefficient, due to the magical and dimensional laws that govern this transformation. Although the amount would be colossal from your perspective, in cosmic and energetic terms, it would barely be a fragment. Celine, leaning back and crossing her arms. Incredible. All that water, all that effort, and you'd barely get 554.4 cubic kilometers. It's like trading an entire planet for a pebble. System. Your analogy is accurate. Universal energy is a form of pure, condensed magic that defies even conventional physical and magical laws. Therefore, obtaining significant quantities of it is not something that can be achieved with resources limited to a single world. Celine, sarcastically. Oh, really? And what do I do then, gather all the seas from several parallel universes? Do I borrow from Poseidon or a primordial system? That would be a viable option, but you would need skills and alliances that you don't currently possess. Celine, laughing bitterly, sure, because that sounds as easy as collecting seashells on the beach. You know what, system? I'd better go back to my wand hunt. These numbers are starting to give me a headache. I wish I hadn't asked anything. I regret it. Celine refocused on the options in the interdimensional market, but she couldn't stop a thought from nagging at her. Celine, muttering. An ocean for a grain of sand. Next time I complain about the price of something, I'll remember this. Then young Snape received a message offering her an onyx wand in exchange for some fragments of philosopher's stone. Isn't that volcanic glass? Celine asked, and received more information from the seller, who told her it was forged using the blue flames of a black phoenix. Celine watched the message as her finger hovered over the confirm button. There was something about that onyx wand that captivated her. Its dark elegance and the mention of the blue flames of a black phoenix filled her with curiosity. Celine, thinking. If it really is forged with black phoenix magic, then it could be a unique weapon. But of course, something so unusual will attract attention. I'll have to be careful when using it. System. Correct. It's a powerful object, but also unusual. Wands made with phoenix magic have unique properties, and this one in particular might have abilities you're not yet aware of. Celine, looking at the screen, somewhat hesitant. Why do I feel like this is some kind of twist of fate? I can already see myself using it in a critical moment and someone saying, "That's no ordinary wand." System. That possibility is high, but the advantages could outweigh the risks. The magic of a black phoenix is extremely rare, even in this world. Finally, Celine sighed and pressed the purchase button. Instantly, a sphere of blue light appeared before her and, after a flash, placed the wand in her hands. The young Snape studied it closely. Celine. It's beautiful. Dark and bright at the same time, as if it captured the night itself on its surface. The wand was made of deep onyx, completely black, but with subtle flashes of brilliant blue that seemed to flicker like tiny flames beneath the surface. Its design was simple yet elegant, with barely visible engravings that resembled ancient runes. System. The power of this wand lies in its ability to amplify fire and darkness spells. It also has an affinity for transformative and defensive magic, likely due to the nature of the black phoenix. However, its overuse could attract unwanted attention. Celine, twirling the wand in her hands, with a slight smile. Well, it seems I have an ace up my sleeve. I won't use it all the time, but when I do, it will be unforgettable. She put the wand back in her magic bag and continued on her way to the train, feeling a little more prepared for the challenges ahead. Although she knew she had to be careful, she couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to unleash its power in an extreme situation. Celine, thinking. I just hope I don't burn down half the castle when I decide to try it. Meanwhile, at the Goblin Bank, they couldn't believe someone had managed to break in and steal something so valuable, or at least parts of it. It was still a scandal. The half-giant and the Potter heir finally emerged from the bank. When Harry asked what had been stolen, He received no answer, only a ticket for the train. Celine asked the system to scan the area, especially the train, for traps or anything, but nothing was found. Everything was clear. Then she saw Hermione trying to befriend some older Slytherin students who were looking down on her. Just then, she saw Harry arrive and went over to Granger. Celine, hovering stealthily and observing the scene, quickly assessed the situation. Hermione seemed to be trying to fit in, chatting animatedly with the older Slytherin students, who barely concealed their disdain. Celine rolled her eyes as she watched these girls exchange glances, clearly mocking Hermione. Celine, thinking. Granger, of all people, why are you trying to befriend them? Don't you realize those girls see you as an insect to be squashed? Meanwhile, Harry paced the platform with a curious, somewhat lost look, clearly unsure of what to do. Celine seized the moment and, remaining stealthy, slipped in behind Hermione. Leaning slightly towards her, she whispered softly. Celine. Granger, those aren't your future best friends. You'd be better off going and saying hello to the boy with glasses who just arrived. Trust me, it'll be much more worthwhile. Hermione turned quickly, searching for the source of the voice, but saw no one. The Slytherin girls seized the opportunity to burst into mocking laughter and stalk off, muttering something about Muggle-born and not wasting time. Hermione frowned, clearly upset, but also noticing Harry. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, but finally took a step toward him. Celine, in a low voice, from the shadows. That's it. Good move. Hermione, approaching Harry. Hello, are you new to this world? My name is Hermione Granger. Do you need any help? Harry, somewhat surprised by the sudden introduction, returned a shy smile. I'm Harry. Harry Potter. And, yes, I think I need a lot of help with all this. Celine, observing the scene from a distance, smiled contentedly. The pieces were beginning to fall into place as planned. Harry now had his future best friend within reach, and Celine was certain that this would set things on the right path. System, whispering to himself. That was an interesting intervention. Although I wonder if you're not getting ahead of yourself a bit in the group dynamics. Celine, mentally. Everything has to start sometime. Better now than never. Besides, if Hermione gets involved with that bunch of snakes, who knows what might happen? I'm just getting back on track a bit. Besides, dealing with Tom and Albus is enough without adding the smartest witch of this generation as a potential rival. Meanwhile, the train was already beginning to fill with students looking for their compartments. Celine decided it was time to move on, making sure to find a good spot from which to keep an eye on Harry and his growing group of allies. Celine boarded the train, taking a seat in an empty compartment as she listened to the new tasks assigned by the system. The first, spending between 5 and 10 galleons on sweets and other items from the trolley, seemed simple. The second, acquiring between 40 and 80 basic first-year spells, seemed more intriguing. Celine, thinking. So they want me to practice my negotiation skills, huh? Very well, this will be interesting. As the train moved forward, Celine decided she had to act quickly. She stood up and began walking down the corridors, looking for the famous lady with the trolley. It wasn't long before she found her making her way along with her trolley full of magical sweets and treats. Celine, with a smile. Hi. I'd like to buy something from the cart, but how much would it cost if I took everything you have? The lady with the trolley, surprised, raised an eyebrow. All of that? Well, that would be, let's say about 12 galleons and 8 sickles. Celine frowned slightly, that was beyond the scope of her task. So she negotiated. Understood, but my budget is 10 galleons. How about we leave out all the Bertie Bott's every flavor beans? I don't think I can handle the risk of finding a, let's say, questionable flavor. The last sentence appears to be a nonsensical string of words and is omitted. The lady laughed slightly. All right, young man. 10 galleons and you can have everything but the jelly beans. Celine paid quickly and took possession of the loot. The cart, now almost empty, contained a few candies that the lady put in her stash. Celine returned to her compartment with several bags full of chocolate frogs, red licorice, bubble gum bombs, and more. Celine, muttering. Now, Let's see if I can use this to get the spells. Meanwhile, she activated her stealth ability and began to wander through the compartments, observing the first-year students. She identified a few who were practicing basic spells with their new wands, though most seemed busy chatting or eating. When the train was halfway to Hogwarts, Celine deactivated her stealth and approached a group of students with a big smile and bags of sweets in her hands. Celine, excitedly. "Hi. My name is Candy. I just bought a bunch of sweets from the cart and thought I'd share them. But with one small condition." One of the students, intrigued, asked. "What condition?" Celine. "I'm looking to learn some basic spells before I get to Hogwarts. If you share some spells you know with me, you can have as many of these sweets as you like. What do you say?" The students exchanged glances, clearly interested. One of them, a somewhat shy boy, stepped forward. "Really? Well, I know Lumos and Nox. And my sister taught me Wingardium Leviosa." Celine offered him some chocolate frogs in exchange, while other students began to approach, ready to negotiate. Little by little, her plan began to bear fruit. System, in his mind. Interesting strategy. Although some of these spells may not be that useful, you'll achieve your goals sooner than expected. And good idea not to give your real name. Celine, mentally. Every spell counts. Besides, never underestimate the power of a good trade. And, incidentally, I'll avoid these sweets sitting in my bag and tempting me. I don't want to get fat, as the saying goes, a moment in your mouth and a lifetime on your hips. Hours later, Celine had amassed a good number of basic spells and leaned back in her seat, satisfied. Mission accomplished. For now. Very well, system, what's my reward? Reward, the system asks. For completing the missions, of course. Celine, reclining in her train seat, looked out the window while waiting for the system's response. Celine, impatiently. Come on, system, don't tell me there wasn't a programmed reward. I'm not going to work here for free. What's the reward for completing the tasks? The system remained silent for a moment, as if it were thinking. Finally, a notification popped into his mind. System. Reward approved. You have unlocked 2 benefits. Explosive mini-copies spell allows you to create small replicas of yourself made of earth. They are not physically strong, but in large numbers they can overwhelm your opponents. They also have the ability to explode on contact or when given a command. Book of Respectful Jokes, a magical grimoire filled with spells designed for harmless pranks. Annoying, but not dangerous, ideal for causing distractions or simply entertaining yourself. Celine, smiling slightly, pulled out the book that magically materialized in her lap. The cover was eye-catching, with bright letters that blinked and moved, Guide to Mischief, Fun with Harmless Spells. The young witch quickly flipped through the pages, finding spells like Footstick, makes shoes stick to the ground for a few seconds, Glowing Nose, makes someone's nose glow like a lamp for a few minutes, and Brief Confusion, causes the person to talk nonsense for 10 seconds. Celine, muttering to herself. This has potential. Although the exploding mini-copies sound much more interesting. They could be useful in serious situations. Or just for scaring someone on a bad day. The system added in a neutral tone. Warning, excessive use of mini-copies can quickly deplete your magical energy, especially if you create too many or cause them all to explode simultaneously. Use them strategically. Celine nodded, accepting the conditions. Then, she decided to test the spell as the train continued its journey toward Hogwarts. She looked out the window and saw an open area with trees and fields. Perfect for a little experiment. She rose from her seat and activated her stealth to step out into the corridor, avoiding curious glances. When she found an empty carriage, she leaned toward the window, opened it slightly, and murmured the words of the new incantation. In front of her, a small mound of earth that had accumulated on the carriage frame began to move and take shape. Soon, a small figure of herself, made entirely of earth, appeared, standing and greeting her with a gesture identical to her own. Celine, laughing. Wow, you're adorable. But let's see what you can do. With a thought, the mini-copy leapt out the window and landed in the field. Celine made it run a few meters before ordering it to explode. A small flash of light and smoke erupted, leaving a tiny crater in the ground. Celine, smiling with satisfaction. I think this will be very useful. Now, about those jokes. Maybe I can try one out on the Gryffindor boys later. She returned to her seat, ready for the rest of the trip, while the system registered her growing enthusiasm. Hearing the toad croak, Celine looked down and saw Neville's elusive toad, Trevor, staring at her with his bulging eyes. She smiled wryly. Always lost, she thought, carefully picking him up. Before she could decide what to do with him, the compartment door opened without warning. An arrogant voice filled the air. Are you the one who sells candy? Celine looked up and, as she suspected, there was Draco Malfoy, with his characteristic air of superiority, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. His tone and expression made it clear that he wasn't interested in sweets, but rather in annoying her. Celine, calmly, holding Trevor, if you want some, I can sell them to you. Although I doubt you can pay with that attitude. Draco frowned, offended by her response. Your parents are muggles, aren't they? That would explain your audacity. Celine laughed softly, as if the question were a bad joke. Looking him straight in the eye, she replied in a cold but calm tone. Perhaps we're distant relatives, Draco. After all, many purebloods, especially men, have a habit of taking advantage of women and then disappearing without taking responsibility for their children. Tell me, do I look familiar to you? Draco, surprised by the response, took a step back. His usual arrogance wavered for a moment as he tried to process what he had just heard. Crabbe and Goyle, as always, looked to their leader, awaiting instructions, but for a moment they saw the girl they considered a Malfoy, but Draco seemed uneasy. Draco, defensively. I don't know what you're talking about. My family is pure. I wouldn't mix with people like you. Celine tilted her head slightly, her smile more challenging than friendly. Of course not. But who knows? Perhaps your ancestors weren't so careful after all. Though don't worry, Draco. If that were true, I probably didn't inherit the attitude. Draco, clearly irritated but without a good response, turned on his heel. Before leaving, he made one last comment. You're not worth my time. Celine watched him leave, slamming the compartment door behind her. She glanced at Trevor and sighed. I suppose fate pulls its own strings, she thought, since she'd used some of the spells she'd been given to slightly alter the appearance of her clothes or herself, and by chance, her new look was like a female Draco. Well, Trevor, looks like I made a new friend today. Now, what do we do with you? The system chimed in with a playful tone in its mechanical voice. Perhaps you could sell him candy in exchange for a spell to find lost toads. Celine chuckled and replied to the system. Good idea. Although I doubt that spell would help Neville. He'd always lose something else. With Trevor in tow, she decided to search for young Longbottom as the train continued its journey toward Hogwarts. Celine made her way through the train's corridors, holding Trevor in one hand as her eyes scanned each compartment for Neville. However, her mind was preoccupied with something entirely different. Celine, curiously. System, that book of magical jokes you gave me. I see that some of the spells require specific hand movements. Those positions remind me of ninja techniques. What do they have to do with magic? The system responded in its neutral and somewhat didactic tone. Spells can be cast in different ways, written, verbal, or through body movements. Hand positions, known as seals, are a way to channel magic more precisely and in a controlled manner. Each position represents a magical element, technique, or concept, and when performed in specific sequences, they activate unique effects. Celine raised an eyebrow, intrigued. So these movements are like a magical language for manipulating energy? How many seals are there? The system continued. There are hundreds of different hand seals, each linked to a specific magical purpose. The combinations between them are virtually endless, allowing you to create custom or modified spells as needed. For example, some of the spells in your joke book require combinations of seals to activate effects like ink explosions or jets of glitter dust. Celine smiled, amused by the idea of applying these techniques. She looked at her own hands and began practicing a couple of simple movements she had seen in the book. As she tried to remember the sequences, Trevor croaked loudly, as if he were participating in the rehearsal. Interesting, Celine murmured as she finished a basic sequence. So it's not just waving your wand and shouting Expelliarmus. This has more style. The system, perhaps jokingly, added. If you train hard enough, you might impress your future enemies with your magical poses. Although you also run the risk of looking eccentric. Celine giggled, imagining herself in a battle casting spells with elaborate movements while her opponents looked on in confusion. Finally, she spotted Neville in a compartment, visibly distressed as he searched for something between the seats. Celine opened the door and lifted Trevor up with a smile. Looking for this? Neville looked up, his eyes shining with relief. Trevor. Thank you so much. Where did you find it? Celine handed him the toad, but before he could reply, she smiled with a negotiating air. Let's just say Trevor found his way to me. Now, Neville. How about you pay me with an interesting spell you can teach me? Don't worry, it doesn't have to be complicated, just useful. Neville, surprised but grateful, nodded nervously. Well, I know a simple spell we use in herbology. It makes plants grow faster. Are you interested? Celine nodded, delighted. Perfect. Show it to me, and let's just say Trevor and I are friends now. As Neville began to teach her the spell, Celine thought to herself that, between the hand positions and the new tricks she would learn, she had all the tools to excel at Hogwarts. And also to cause a little chaos. In the Slytherin carriage, Draco Malfoy was lost in thought while his classmates argued about who would be the next star player on the Quidditch team. But Draco barely heard them. His mind was fixated on the girl from the train, the one who bore an uncanny resemblance to him. Draco, thinking. What if? It can't be? My father? Another secret family? I don't think so. Or can I? That girl, her gaze, her attitude. There's something strange about her. But I can't let this affect me. What if someone else noticed? Draco straightened up in his seat and forced himself into his usual air of arrogance, dismissing the thought for the time being. Meanwhile, Celine finished practicing the movements of the growth spell Neville had taught her, but without a wand, which was for safety since she still didn't have full control of her magic, or so Neville believed. Beside her, Trevor watched curiously, as if he were a magic critic. Celine smiled and stroked the toad with a finger before speaking quietly to the system. Celine, what do you think, system? I'm getting pretty good at these tricks. I changed my appearance for every deal I made on the train, and now I have more in my inventory than I expected. The system responded in its neutral tone. Your stealth and adaptability skills are impressive. The decision to alter your appearance for each business has significantly reduced the chances of someone connecting your activities. Furthermore, your mastery of magical seals and basic spells is progressing rapidly. Celine smiled contentedly and muttered to herself. It's like being a magical spy. No one will recognize me. Not even if someone is looking for a supposed half-sister of Malfoy's. To further conceal her identity, Celine cast a swift spell that altered the color of her clothes to a neutral tone, changed her hair to dark brown, and adjusted her skin tone to make her appear more tanned. She also used a technique to make her eyes a bright green, similar to Harry's. In another carriage, Hermione entered the compartment where Neville was with Celine. With her usual practical air, Hermione announced. Neville. We're almost at Hogwarts, you should change into your uniform right now. Neville jumping up immediately, while Hermione looked at Celine curiously. Hermione was perceptive, and although she said nothing, Celine noticed the spark of suspicion in her eyes. To deflect attention, Celine smiled kindly and said, Of course, Neville. Go get changed, you don't want to be late. Hermione, still suspicious, watched Celine for a moment longer before leaving with Neville. When they both left, Celine sighed. Celine, thinking. That girl is too observant for my liking. I'd better keep a low profile when she's around. But how does she know the Longbottom heir? They became friends at the station. Well, what's meant to be will be. I wonder if Granger thought we were doing anything inappropriate here. With everyone else busy preparing for her arrival, Celine checked her list of spells and plans one last time, making sure she was ready for what awaited her at Hogwarts. Her heart pounded with excitement. She was about to enter the magical world she had always dreamed of. But in her own unique way. Celine decided to use stealth and waited when there was a knock at the door and no one answered. Hermione and Neville entered the compartment. Celine slipped through the door with agility, taking advantage of the confusion and the noise of the train stopping. She couldn't risk being accidentally touched, as her magical camouflage was good for sight but not for physical contact. She moved cautiously, like a shadow among shadows. Celine watched from the shadows as the chaos of students boarding boats to Hogwarts unfolded around her. She remained completely silent, making sure no one noticed her presence. Upon reaching the lake, Celine asked the system for an analysis of options for crossing undetected. The system responded in its efficient tone. The surveillance enchantments on the lake are sensitive to active magic in the air. Any attempt at flight, levitation, or magical displacement will be detected immediately. It is recommended to use non-magical means to cross the lake. Celine looked at the boats, where the students were already beginning to settle in. Then she saw a larger boat, designated for student luggage. It was her best option. She waited patiently until the attendants began loading trunks and crates, and took advantage of a moment of distraction to slip away. With an agile and silent leap, she landed inside the boat without making the slightest sound. As she settled herself behind a large trunk, she thought to herself, "Well, this isn't exactly Snape-worthy, but it'll do for now." The system added with a touch of irony. Adapting to circumstances is an important skill. Although, you might want to avoid someone checking the trunks unannounced. Celine huffed quietly and made sure to stay hidden as the boats moved across the dark, still lake. The sight of the castle illuminated against the night sky was something she had longed for. Her heart was racing, but she knew this was only the beginning. She had a plan, and she wouldn't let anything stop her. As the boat slowly made its way toward the dock, Celine reflected. This is all new, exciting, and dangerous. But if I'm going to survive here and achieve what I want, I'll have to outsmart everyone else. With that determination in mind, Celine prepared for her arrival at Hogwarts, ready to face the next challenge on her path. "All right, we've crossed," Celine says. The system tells her she can fly now, as the barrier only triggers an alarm if something using magic to fly passes through it. Upon hearing this, she decides to float to listen to a mission alert. She must play pranks in the castle without being discovered. System, will there be a reward? I don't work for free, she asks. Of course, the system replies, but Celine has her suspicions. Celine floated silently above the group of students, listening to Malfoy and Harry's conversation. When Draco extended his hand with that air of superiority, Celine couldn't help but smile mischievously. System, he murmured softly, how visible will this glowing nose spell be? Moderately eye-catching, the system replied. The duration will be 5 minutes, but if you enhance it with your personal magic, it could last up to 15. Perfect, Celine thought, as she discreetly pointed her finger at Malfoy. With a swift movement, she cast the spell, without making a sound. A flash of light shot out, striking Draco directly in the nose. In an instant, his nose began to glow brightly, as if he had a Christmas light mounted on his face. The blush on his face shifted from surprise to horror. What the hell? Malfoy exclaimed, frantically touching his nose. What have they done to me? The students around them, including Crabbe and Goyle, were shocked for a few seconds before bursting into laughter. Even some of the new first-year students couldn't help but giggle nervously. Harry, who had initially looked confused, soon broke into a wide grin. Hermione put her hand to her mouth to hide her laughter, and Ron simply doubled over with laughter. Stop laughing, Potter! Draco shouted furiously. This isn't funny. From her floating position, Celine could barely contain herself from bursting into laughter. That was satisfying, she thought, as the system notified her. Partial mission complete, 1 prank successfully executed. Progressive reward activated. Keep it up. Draco, meanwhile, was desperately trying to dim the light from his nose, but he couldn't. He even tried covering it with his hands, but the light was so intense that it seeped through his fingers. Celine, enjoying the scene, thought, this will be the first of many. No one will be safe from Celine Snape Evans's pranks. And with a mischievous grin, she floated off to another part of the group, searching for her next target. After all, the night was still young, and Hogwarts was about to discover that a new force of mischief had arrived at the castle. Celine took a deep breath as she watched Professor McGonagall from her floating hiding place. The teacher's stern gaze left no doubt. She suspected something, but hadn't found any proof yet. Relax, she told herself, if you stay calm, they won't be able to find you. System, she whispered, trying to distract herself from her nerves. Okay, System, do you have any suggestions for the prank mission? Maybe if you use the bubbling flatulence curse, I think I know what you mean, but explain it to me, she said. That curse increases gas in the intestines, and when it comes out, it becomes bubbles. It would be best if you went to the kitchen to cast it. Are you saying that the curse of bubbling flatulence would be more effective in the kitchen? Why there? The kitchen is a strategic location, the system explained. Many students sneak in there at night, and it's likely the house elves will be preparing something for the big welcome dinner. If the curse subtly affects the food, anyone who eats it will be in an awkward situation for hours. Plus, you're less likely to get caught. Celine raised an eyebrow. And wouldn't that be cruel to house elves? I don't want to cause trouble for someone who doesn't deserve it, the system responded in a neutral tone. The curse will not affect elves, only those who consume the enchanted food. You can target it exclusively at the banquets of the older students. This reduces the chances of someone vulnerable suffering the consequences. The idea seemed clever to him. Well thought out. Let's do it. Carefully, Celine glided through the air, making sure McGonagall didn't detect her presence. She headed toward the entrance to the kitchens, located behind a picture of fruit on the wall. Ah, I remember it from the books, she thought, and extended a finger to tickle the pear in the picture. The fruit giggled, and the secret door opened. Inside, the house elves were busy preparing an impressive feast: roasts, pies, freshly baked bread, and jugs of magical juices. Celine, taking advantage of her invisibility, positioned herself near the dishes intended for all the students, carefully took some of the food, and murmured the incantation. Inflatus burbuli, she whispered, pointing her wand at the food platters. A faint magical mist enveloped the dishes, vanishing in an instant. Perfect, she thought, there won't be any visible effects until after they start eating. With the job done, Celine quietly slipped out of the kitchens. The system notified her in a low voice. Progressive mission complete, strategic prank executed. Reward on its way. Later, in the Great Hall, Celine observed the room with a mixture of fascination and distaste. The floating candles lent it a magical touch, but she couldn't help thinking how impractical it all was. Every time she saw an owl flying overhead, she imagined the horror of something unpleasant falling into her food, droppings or pellets. This is a potential disaster waiting to happen, she muttered to herself, as a large owl flew right over the Slytherin table. How come no one has complained about this? The system, which was always listening, soon intervened. The ceiling's spell is an advanced projection that replicates the sky outside. However, it has no physical properties. That is to say, it doesn't protect against external elements, such as birds or their byproducts. Celine frowned, still picturing the traumatic scene of a gift falling into her cereal bowl. That's not acceptable. If I have to eat here for years, I need a solution. What options do I have, system? The system responded in its usual neutral and practical tone. You could create a personal magical barrier around your space at the table. There are charms that deflect small objects or liquids, but they will require practice. Alternatively, you could develop a spell that discourages birds from flying over your area, which will interfere with their ability to deliver something to you or use them as messengers. You should activate and deactivate it. Celine rested her chin on her hand, pondering. Both ideas are good. But I prefer the personal barrier. That way I can eat peacefully anywhere in the castle, not just here. And speaking of the ceiling, can I learn that spell and adapt it for my own room? I want it to look like I'm sleeping under the stars. The system took a moment to process before responding. The enchanted sealing spell is complex and tied to the magical structure of the Great Hall. However, with enough practice, you could replicate a simplified version for smaller spaces, such as a bedroom. That made Celine smile. Perfect. You know what? I like this plan. First, barriers to keep anything from falling into my food. Then, a starry ceiling for my room. Maybe I'll even add a charm that plays nature sounds to help me relax. She leaned forward, studying the floating candles with a calculating look. And as for those candles, I think I can improve them. Floating light bulbs, like the ones I mentioned before. No wax, no fire, just pure magic. Now that would be worthy of Hogwarts. Besides making a lot of money, or maybe not, these wizards seem rather backward for my taste, Snape mused. While the students continued eating and chatting, Celine was already planning her next project, a smile of anticipation on her face. She sat discreetly away from the other students, observing with anticipation. Everything seemed normal until the older Slytherin and Gryffindor students began to frown. First, there was a faint murmur, then a chorus of nervous laughter as bubbles floated behind some of them. The students tried to hide their displeasure, but soon the bubbles began to pop with small, comical sounds. "By Merlin!" exclaimed one of the Slytherin prefects, as a group of Gryffindors burst into laughter. Even some of the professors couldn't help but smile at the spectacle. Celine, hiding her satisfaction, thought, this is just the beginning. Hogwarts will never forget Celine Snape Evans. Celine couldn't help but bite her lip to stifle a loud laugh, as the stealth would be shattered, so to speak, by any noise she made. Everything was going perfectly, until she noticed something was very, very wrong. The professors were affected, too. McGonagall wore an expression of utter bewilderment, trying to maintain her composure as bubbles floated around her, several of them emanating from her. Professor Snape was furious, his face even paler than usual, though he tried to conceal his discomfort. But the worst sight was Dumbledore. Even the venerable headmaster seemed to be struggling to maintain his usual serenity as a small flurry of golden bubbles escaped from his chair. Oh, no, Celine thought, swallowing hard. This wasn't part of the plan. How could they have eaten the tainted food? Shouldn't they have magical barriers against this? The system tells you that charms can be very specific, they might prevent poison or something that would kill you, but a non-lethal joke is another matter. And as if things couldn't get any worse, Celine felt a sharp pain in her forehead, a sensation that coursed through her entire body. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm herself, but she knew exactly what it meant. He's close, she thought. Her magic and Voldemort's, though weakened at that moment, the teacher's table and saw Quirinus Quirrell, the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, clearly uncomfortable. He was clutching the edges of his turban with one hand as he squirmed in his seat. His face was as red as a tomato, and he looked more nervous than ever. Celine could have sworn she heard a faint "damn it" escape his lips. Apparently, he can't control the effects of the joke either, Celine thought, feeling both horrified and amused. Despite the chaos, a part of Celine relaxed when she saw Draco Malfoy's face, a mask of utter embarrassment, as he tried to hide his discomfort while Hermione looked at him with a mocking smile. Well done, Granger, Celine thought. However, the young lioness suffered the same fate and squealed. Should she or shouldn't she enjoy the irony, Snape's daughter wondered. But when she saw that even Harry and Ron were beginning to feel the effects of the joke just like their teachers, she knew she had to act quickly. System, she whispered in her mind, any solution to neutralize the effects of the prank before they suspect me? The system responded calmly. You can cast a counterspell into the air of the Great Hall, but this will reveal traces of your magic. Or you could let the effects dissipate on their own, though that could take an hour or more. Celine frowned. I don't have an hour. If my father or Dumbledore finds out about this, I'll be in trouble. And I don't want them to suspect me so soon. Carefully, she murmured a neutralizing spell beneath the table, discreetly pointing her onyx wand toward the ceiling of the Great Hall. An almost imperceptible magical ripple rippled through the room, and slowly the effects began to dissipate. The affected professors and students ceased writhing, and the bubbles vanished, though the embarrassment on their faces remained. Crisis resolved, Celine thought, settling back into her seat as if nothing had happened. but she couldn't help wondering if Voldemort, hidden in Quirrell's body, had sensed her magic when she cast the counterspell. Meanwhile, Dumbledore adjusted his glasses, looking around with a mixture of confusion and amusement. "Well, this has been peculiar," he said with an enigmatic smile. "I hope no one else has digestive problems for the rest of the night." Celine breathed a sigh of relief, but deep down she knew she'd have to be more careful next time. "Okay, system," she thought, "that was a glorious disaster. Give me a mission that won't blow my cover." Celine decided to go to the room of requirement to rest in a safe place within the castle. It was that or camp in the forest, which she would avoid as much as possible until she became stronger. As she walked, she asked the system what her reward was. It told her some cleansing spells. Celine snorted as she reactivated her stealth, walking carefully through the dark corridors of the castle. "Cleaning spells?" she muttered under her breath, clearly indignant. "Really? This doesn't even cover the risk I took with that prank. If the teachers had found out, I would have ended up cleaning the toilets with Filch for a month." The system, with its cold and pragmatic tone, responded calmly. "You didn't face a dragon, Celine. Nor did you face Voldemort himself. You merely caused a slight disturbance in the castle. This level of effort does not warrant a more elaborate reward." Celine rolled her eyes, almost wanting to argue, but she knew she couldn't win against the system. She finally reached the 7th floor, standing in front of the wall where the room of requirement was supposed to appear. She paced back and forth, focusing on what she needed. A safe place to rest and think, she repeated to herself. On the 3rd step, the door appeared, and Celine went inside. The room was warm and inviting, with a soft sofa, a plush bed, and a crackling fireplace. There was even a table with snacks and a steaming kettle. She sighed with relief and sank down onto the sofa. As she gazed into the fire, she spoke to the system again. "Fine, I accept the cleansing spells, but at least tell me they're useful. Can I clean up other people's messes or just my own?" The system responded in a neutral tone. "The spells are advanced. They don't just clean dust or dirt, but also eliminate magical traces and residual energies. With these, you could erase evidence of any future pranks or even cover your magical tracks if you make mistakes." That caught Celine's attention. "Cover up my magical footprints? Well, that sounds better. Though I still think you could have been more generous. You could also use them in medical treatments, eliminating certain poisons or clearing infections." The system responds accordingly. He leaned back on the sofa, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. After a few minutes, he allowed himself to relax. But soon he was talking again, as if he needed to plan his next move. "System, tell me. Are there any missions that don't involve putting myself in danger or that I can do from here? Something discreet, but that gives me a more interesting reward." The system was silent for a few moments before responding. "You could begin a knowledge-gathering mission. Research rare spells, ancient magic, or forgotten artifacts in the Hogwarts library. Each significant discovery will grant you points that can be exchanged for resources or abilities." Celine's eyes sparkled. "That sounds like something I can do. And hopefully, I won't get into trouble. For now." With a slight smile, she poured herself a cup of tea from the table and began to devise her next plan. The young witch decided to go to sleep and took her familiar snake out of its pouch. She asked it the name it had chosen, as she felt a strong emotion upon hearing it. The snake replied that it reminded her of one of her caregivers from when she was younger, a woman with dark skin whose appearance was different from other people's. As they talked, Celine fell asleep, and her familiar coiled around her, seeking warmth. The next day, Snape woke up and yawned as she stroked her familiar snake, which was still coiled around her. She had slept soundly, and the conversation with her scaly companion had left her reflecting on her mysterious past. Upon standing, she decided not to waste any time. "System, I have an important question," she said, stretching and beginning to dress. "Instead of risking being seen going to the library, can I use the room of requirement to summon the books I need?" The system responded in its usual efficient, emotionless tone. The room of requirement has the capacity to provide resources that align with the user's needs. However, access to certain knowledge is limited by what already exists within the castle. If the books you seek are in the Hogwarts library or are common in this world, the room may be able to reproduce them for you. Celine frowned, considering her options. What if I look for more specific books? You know, something more advanced or maybe a little dark. The system paused before responding, as if assessing her intention. If the knowledge you seek is unavailable in the library or considered restricted, you will need to find a way to physically access those texts. You could use stealth, or, if you choose to be more strategic, seek support within the library itself to learn spells that will help you overcome the barriers of the restricted library. Celine sighed as she adjusted her robes. There's always a but, isn't there? Fine. Let's start with the basics. I'll have the room of requirement give me the most useful books available. And if that's not enough, I'll find another way to get to the forbidden section. As he spoke, the familiar snake raised its head and hissed softly, as if in agreement with his decision. Celine smiled, giving him a gentle tap on the head. Okay, let's get to work. System, do you have any keyword suggestions to help the room understand what I want? The system responded immediately. I recommend specifying topics such as advanced spells for beginners, curses and counterspells, enchantments for object manipulation, and magical defense spells. You could also request a practice space with safety barriers to protect you while you experiment. Celine nodded, excited by what she could accomplish. Perfect. I'll use the room of requirement and see how useful it can be. With her familiar snake coiling around her wrist like a living bracelet, Celine used the magic to summon a library to the place where they were. Celine looked at the books in front of her, her eyes shining with excitement, but her enthusiasm quickly faded when she heard the system's tasks. Steel, mandrakes? Get unicorn blood? And phoenix tears and feathers. She repeated incredulously, crossing her arms as the snake on her wrist hissed softly, as if sharing her bewilderment. This is madness. What's next? Should I steal the sorting hat? Or Quirrell's turban? Or Dumbledore's beard? The system responded in its usual unflappable tone. There's no need to collect iconic objects. The assigned tasks are for gathering materials that will boost your progress and expand your magical resources. There's no specific order in which to complete them or a set time limit. Celine snorted, shaking her head. And you say they have no time limit or order. That's something, I suppose. But how do you expect me to get unicorn blood or phoenix tears without causing a disaster? The system paused briefly before responding. You can complete the tasks through strategic exploration, stealth, or trading. Unicorn blood can be obtained without harming them if you find a spot where a wounded unicorn has left traces. Phoenix tears are extremely rare, but if you manage to gain one's trust, it might offer them willingly. As for mandrakes, they're available in the greenhouse, and you can employ a plan to take some undetected. Celine sighed deeply and slumped into a makeshift chair that magically appeared beside her. This is getting complicated. If only I had a team to help me. She glanced at her snake and chuckled softly. Although, of course, you'd be the leader. The snake hissed in agreement, which brought a smile to Celine's face. All right, system. Let's do it this way, start small. Help me organize the spells I already know and the ones I can learn from these books. Then we'll figure out how to tackle those impossible tasks. The system responded instantly. I've identified your current capabilities and the categories you could improve. Stealth and discretion, improve your ability to avoid detection while exploring. Gathering charms, to collect magical materials without direct contact. Defensive magic, in case of unexpected encounters. Manipulation of magical creatures, gain the trust of beings such as unicorns or phoenixes. That seems reasonable, Celine murmured, flipping through one of the books in front of her. But first, let's practice with something simple. Perhaps an improved stealth spell or something that will help me avoid leaving traces. The system added with a slight tone of warning, I recommend not underestimating the time required to complete tasks. While there is no limit, some opportunities may be unique, and your progress at Hogwarts could depend on completing them on time. Celine jumped up, pointing in the air. I knew it. There's always a catch. Very well, system. Let's get to work. But let me make this clear, If I end up in the Forbidden Forest looking for unicorns, I want something really good as a reward. With renewed determination and the snake on her wrist watching everything, Celine began to review the books in front of her, preparing for the challenge the system had presented to her. Severus's daughter stopped, as it wasn't really necessary to start fulfilling the missions, and thought before acting. After all, she wasn't a Gryffindor. She thought she could wait for Voldemort to attack the unicorns to get their blood, but that would be cursed because of the unicorn's violent death. She asked the system, if leeches suck the blood of a unicorn, are they cursed? The system processed the question and answered no. Celine smiled slyly as she listened to the system's response. So, if I use leeches to collect the blood, I'll avoid the curse. It's a bit twisted, but effective. The snake on her wrist hissed softly, as if approving of the ingenuity of her plan. Celine began pacing back and forth in the room of requirement, fine-tuning the details in her mind. First, I need to find a unicorn and approach it without scaring it. To do that, I'd have to learn some kind of attraction spell for magical creatures or get something they like, such as wildflowers or apples. Then, I prepare the leeches and... that's it. The system intervened, ever practical. I recommend a more detailed plan to minimize risks. You could practice stealth in the Forbidden Forest before attempting to approach a unicorn. It would also be wise to ensure the leeches are enchanted so you don't harm them while collecting their blood. Celine stopped, nodding slowly. Good idea. I don't want to harm the unicorns or attract unnecessary attention. Besides, I'll need a special vial to store the blood and prevent it from losing its magical properties. The young snake consulted one of the books she had brought from the room of requirement, looking for information on preservation charms. As she read, she began to speak aloud. Come to think of it, this method not only gives me what I need, it also keeps me out of trouble. If anyone asks how I got the blood, I can say I found it in the forest. And the best part is, I won't have to face Voldemort. Yet. The snake hissed again, this time with a tone that seemed to warn her. Celine looked at her familiar with a raised eyebrow. What? It's not as if I can avoid it forever. But in the meantime, I'll take every opportunity I can to grow stronger. The system added one last piece of advice. If you decide to implement this plan, be sure to practice first with smaller animals to perfect your technique. A mistake near a unicorn could alert the magical creatures of the forest, making it harder for you to approach them in the future. Celine sighed, closing the book in front of her. All right, system. I'll practice carefully. Now, time to find leeches and prepare the preservation spell. With a confident smile, Celine left the room of requirement, ready to take the next step in her mission, while her snake watched her with bright eyes, as if it too enjoyed the challenge ahead. But the system gave her an interesting piece of information, that she, as a maiden, could attract a male unicorn, but if she were a female, it would generate hostility. Celine paused as she listened to the system's information. Maiden, huh? That explains a lot about why unicorns are always so popular in stories. Well, system, if I can attract them easily, I'll have to take advantage of it. But you can also buy some silver apples or get sweets to appease them by gaining their trust, the system informs you. The young woman began mentally checking her candy inventory as she walked through the castle corridors. I have chocolate frogs, black licorice, lemon drops, and those jelly beans I never intend to eat. Do you think they'd like them? The system responded in its usual practical tone. Some magical creatures are attracted to sweets because of their aroma, but unicorns prefer more natural foods. Silver apples are a better option for gaining their trust, especially if they are female unicorns, as they might be more wary of you. Celine frowned. So, what do you suggest? Should I go to the interdimensional market right now, or try to find something here at Hogwarts? The system responded with clear options. You can look for the silver apples in the interdimensional market, but they'll cost more Philosopher's Stone fragments. If you prefer to obtain them locally, there are rumors that the Forbidden Forest has an enchanted tree that bears similar fruit, though you might need a spell to identify them. Celine sighed, considering her options. Celine looked at a book titled The Invisible Man with curiosity, which reminded her of some movies. Tell me, system, is there any muggle or non-magical chemical that can make people invisible? If that was the simple answer given to Snape's daughter. System, do you mean there's a non-magical formula for invisibility? The system, in its neutral tone, responded, correct. There are chemical formulas that achieve a temporary invisibility effect by modifying the refraction of light around the body. However, they usually have limitations. They don't affect clothing or objects that aren't part of the body, and they could leave minor side effects, such as a metallic taste in the mouth for a few hours. Young Snape raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And that's not going to drive me crazy like the guy in the book? The system clarified immediately. No. That was a dramatized interpretation. The formula available on the interdimensional market does not affect the mind or poison the body. Celine crossed her arms, weighing the information. But I'd have to walk around naked to be completely invisible, and that's not exactly practical. Besides, with my luck, I'd end up in an awkward situation. But unlike my stealth, I wouldn't make a sound, and even though I'm wearing slime clothes, my silhouette is still noticeable, especially if you're close. The system responded with an additional piece of information. There are magical alternatives for creating invisible cloaks or clothing, although they are considerably more expensive. You could also combine both solutions, use the formula and some invisibility spell on the clothing. But combining several magics could be dangerous in the worst-case scenario. Celine chuckled. So it's a matter of budget and risk, as always. Fine, system, add that formula to my wish list. Who knows when I might need it? Though I hope I don't have to run naked through the castle. As she placed the book back, young Snape began to consider the possibilities of combining that formula with her magical stealth. It might come in handy sometime. Perhaps for one of those epic pranks I have planned, or escaping for my life without a trace. Nasha, I'll leave you in the room of requirement while I go out. Maybe you'll find some rats, if not, I'll see what I can get you to eat. The snake nods its head. Celine left using her stealth and toured the castle. At that moment, Celine observed in her invisible state Harry and Ron, who looked completely disoriented as they walked through the corridors of Hogwarts. They definitely got lost, she whispered to herself, remembering the scene in the movies where they were late to Transfiguration. With a small smile, she decided to intervene. It's to the right, she told them in a firm but low tone. Both boys spun around quickly, surprised. Who said that? Ron asked, looking around with wide eyes. Harry frowned, scanning his surroundings. I don't know. Maybe a ghost? Celine, who had activated her stealth instantly after speaking, watched them from a dark corner, barely suppressing a laugh. Great, no idea where that voice came from, but at least I listened to you, said Ron, pushing Harry toward the right-hand corridor. From her hiding place, Celine smiled broadly. They may not know me, but I still have to look out for you, Harry. Although I can't help thinking how fun it would be to play another little trick on them, she thought, resisting the temptation. With one last glance to make sure they'd taken the right path, Celine turned in the opposite direction. Now, let's find something more interesting to do before the day's over, she thought to herself, vanishing into the shadows of the castle. It was best to take advantage of those areas if she suddenly broke her stealth. It's good to see the students helping each other, a male voice says, but I'm surprised, young lady, that you're not in class and out of uniform. Celine, still invisible, raises her head and looks at a ghost from another era, judging by his style of clothing. Can you see me? She asks, and the ghost smiles. With that magic, you're only invisible to mortals, but to those like me, we see you easily. Celine curses internally, I'm as noticeable as a neon sign to ghosts. Oh, I ate a lot of sweets last night, and well, I felt bad, but I'm better now. The ghost, an elegant gentleman in antique robes with a mocking smile, floated before Celine with his arms crossed. Lots of sweets, you say? He asked, raising a spectral eyebrow. His voice was calm, but laced with a hint of amusement. That would explain why you're not in class, but not why you're invisibly snooping around the hallways. Celine took a deep breath, knowing that lying to a ghost probably wouldn't be easy. Well, besides feeling better, I thought it would be a good idea to move around a bit. You know, stretch my legs before class. The ghost chuckled softly, its figure flickering for a moment before solidifying back into its spectral form. What a creative excuse. However, it's not common for a student to possess that level of magic, much less someone who seems to want to remain so hidden. Celine cursed inwardly again. She was caught between the ghost's curiosity and its ability to see her clearly. "And you?" she asked, trying to change the subject. "Who are you? I don't recall seeing you in the Hogwarts stories." The ghost inclined his head slightly, as if considering how much he should share. "Lord Adrian of Lily, at your service," he said with a small, theatrical gesture. "A noble wizard of my time, who once walked these halls centuries ago, before the more well-known ghosts had settled here." Celine raised an eyebrow. "Before nearly headless Nick?" Adrian gave a mocking chuckle. "That nobody arrived much later. Although I must admit his nickname has a certain charm. Now, young lady, tell me. What's a Snape up to, wandering around the castle invisible?" Celine blinked. "How do you know I'm a Snape?" Adrian smiled broadly, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "I recognize your family's features. Besides, you're not the first Snape I've crossed paths with. Now, what do you say we make a deal? I'll steer you away from trouble. In exchange for an interesting story about what you're really doing here." Celine crossed her arms, visibly uneasy but intrigued. "Well, Lord of Lily, tell me what you have in mind." The ghost inclined his head, satisfied. "Ah, excellent. Let's walk and talk, shall we?" he said, floating peacefully as Celine followed him, still under the effect of his stealth. Celine thought, "I definitely have to buy that invisibility formula and see if the ghosts notice me or not. Even with stealth, they can still see me, and Harry's invisibility cloak might or might not hide me from them. According to the story of the three brothers, not even death could locate someone hiding behind it." "Very well, child," Lord Adrian of Lily said, "tell me about yourself." "Well," she replied, "I'm the illegitimate daughter of Severus and Lily. I'd rather not reveal that, and it seems my father knows nothing about me or doesn't want to know me, since I grew up in an orphanage." Lord Adrian of Lily's spectral face darkened for a moment at Celine's words. "My, a tale that could move even the coldest portraits in this castle." He floated beside her, gazing at her with a mixture of curiosity and pity. To be the daughter of two such significant figures and yet remain in the shadows. "I must admit you have my attention, young Snape." Celine walked with calculated steps, though she was still under his cloak. She found it difficult to open up, but there was something about the presence of this ghost that made her feel she wouldn't be judged. "It wasn't easy growing up in the orphanage," she confessed after a moment of silence. "I learned to fend for myself early on. I had no one to take care of me, no magic, not even a clue to my origins. But now..." Celine lifted her chin slightly. "Now I have the tools to change my destiny." Adrian nodded slowly, his eyes shining with a spark of admiration. "A story of struggle and perseverance. I must say, your determination reminds me of someone I knew a long time ago. Though less moody." Celine couldn't help but smile slightly at the comment. "I suppose you mean my father." The ghost chuckled softly, its form swaying as if touched by the breeze. "Severus, yes. He was an intriguing young man, more shadows than light, but that's what made him fascinating. Though I must say, you seem to be an interesting blend of both your parents. Severus's strength and cunning, combined with the warmth Lily radiated." Celine looked away, feeling a strange knot in her chest. She wasn't used to hearing good things about herself, especially not about her parents. "I didn't come here to follow in their footsteps," she said finally, changing the subject. "I have my own goals, and they have nothing to do with what they did." Adrian stared at her, his smile fading slightly. "That's admirable, child, but let me give you some advice: don't run from who you are. Your blood, your origins, even the shadows of your past, all of that can be a source of power if you know how to use it." Celine frowned, her hands clenching into fists. "I don't want to depend on any of that. I want to be self-reliant." The truth was, she wanted to increase her own power and could very well seek outside help, but it was best not to reveal this to this stranger. Adrian sighed, crossing his arms as he floated in front of her. "As you wish, but don't forget my words. Now, tell me, how willing are you to break the rules to achieve your goals? Celine smiled slightly, but there was a determined gleam in her eyes. It depends. What are the rules you want me to break? The ghost laughed with genuine amusement this time, raising a spectral eyebrow. Oh, little Snape, I think we're going to get along quite well. And with a dramatic flourish, he began to float down the corridor, hoping Celine would follow. Well, Mr. Ghost, to give you an example of the things I've done to achieve my goals, they would be these. I started a fire in a garbage dump to get the authorities' attention and tell them that children were being sold at the orphanage, which was true, and I took all the money I could to go far away. With magic, I scared a clothing vendor who was giving me dirty looks because of the rags I was wearing and took several items, but I left her the corresponding money. Celine didn't say anything about her act at the Goblin Bank. Lord Adrian of Early stopped abruptly and turned to face her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Well, that is fascinating, to say the least. His spectral eyes gleamed with a mixture of approval and caution. I expected nothing less from a daughter of Severus Snape. That cunning and that ability to act without fear of the consequences. Though I must say your methods are rather extreme. Celine crossed her arms, showing no remorse. I did what I had to do. It's not like anyone else was going to help me. And those who suffered, well, they weren't exactly innocent. Especially the child trafficker. The ghost hovered around her, carefully assessing her. So, you not only have the determination, but also the resourcefulness to survive. That's good, very good. Though I must warn you, my dear child, that acting this way at Hogwarts could get you into more trouble than you can imagine. This place is full of eyes that see beyond the obvious. Celine raised an eyebrow, challenging him with her gaze. And what do you suggest? That I stay put and follow the rules like an obedient child? Because that's not going to happen, especially if the rules of the game prevent the players from winning. Adrian let out a laugh that echoed in the empty hallway. No, of course not. I'm just saying, if you're going to play with fire, make sure no one sees the smoke. After all, rules are there to be bent, not necessarily broken. Celine gave a mischievous smile. I can do that. The ghost stopped in front of a blank wall and gestured dramatically. So, here's my advice. If you truly want to be the best version of yourself, don't just think about surviving. Think about thriving. Take what you need, learn what you can, and make sure everyone who underestimated you pays for it. Celine looked at him for a moment, taking in his words. Then, with a spark of determination in her eyes, she nodded. That's exactly what I plan to do. Adrian smiled broadly, satisfied. Then, little Snape, I think you'll be one of the most interesting students Hogwarts has seen for a long time. Just remember, shadows can be your best ally. Or your worst enemy. With a theatrical gesture, the ghost began to fade away, but his words echoed in the air, we'll see each other soon, child. Celine stood there for a moment, staring at the blank wall and feeling a mixture of excitement and challenge. Well, shadows. Let's see who's in charge here. And with that, she resumed walking using her stealth, ready to plot her next move. Act and imagine. After a few steps, Celine realized she was near the potions classroom and thought, Lord Adrian, you're a schemer, but I'm not a foolish moth drawn to a flame. She decided to go in and remembered roughly where Harry would sit. She looked for something to write on and left it there, where Harry found it, read it, and the class began. Celine quietly settled into a dark corner of the potions classroom, observing the interaction between her father and Harry Potter. Although she tried not to make a sound, a small smile curved her lips as she watched Snape with his typical intimidating air and Harry trying to stay afloat under his scrutiny. And so Snape asks Potter, what will I get if I add powdered asphodel root to an infusion of wormwood? He then asks, where would you look if I told you to find a bezoar? In the stomach of a goat, Potter replies, but also in the gallbladder of an ox, and humans can have bezoars from the accumulation of partially digested material trapped in the stomach or intestines. When Harry gave his answer about the bezoar, Celine was pleased that he quickly memorized what he'd written and mentioned the other places where they could be found. Snape raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated. Correct. Sort of. although that extra level of detail seems somewhat unnecessary. Perhaps, Potter, you could focus more on answering the question, rather than trying to impress. The Slytherins chuckled, and Harry clenched his jaw, trying to hold it in. Celine, from her corner, noticed Hermione muttering something to herself, probably mentally repeating every word from a textbook. Then Snape continued, without missing a beat. "Tell me, Potter, if I wanted to create a potion that would induce a sleep so deep it resembled death, what ingredient would be essential?" Harry's mind went blank again, while Snape looked at him with a faint glint of triumph in his eyes. Before Harry could even try to come up with something, Hermione raised her hand, but Snape deliberately ignored her. Celine wanted to take the opportunity to approach him and whisper, barely audible but enough for Harry to hear the answer, but that wasn't possible since everyone would see her. "Valerian root," Potter remembered. Harry said the answer aloud. "Valerian root." Snape stared at him, clearly puzzled by how Harry had gotten it right this time. "Correct," he replied icily, his dark eyes scanning the classroom as if searching for the source of this unexpected answer. "Though it is curious how you arrived at that conclusion, Potter." As Snape walked away to continue the lesson, Celine couldn't help but let out a small, quiet laugh from her hiding place. She thought to herself, helping him was fun, but I can't let myself get caught. This game has only just begun. When class ended, Harry checked the note he'd found on his desk at the beginning. It read, "Remember, sometimes the answers aren't right in front of you, but in the most unexpected places. Observe, listen, learn." Harry crumpled the note, intrigued by who could have left it. But deep down, a faint curiosity was beginning to stir, as Celine quietly withdrew, satisfied with the controlled chaos she'd sown. The system told her she could play another prank and win a reward that would be bigger if it affected many people. Celine, making hand movements, made several spheres of floating water appear on the ceiling. Celine, still concealed by her stealth, watched intently from the shadows of the potions classroom. The water spheres she had conjured floated peacefully on the ceiling, awaiting the perfect moment to fall. She knew this prank would be risky, but so too would the reward the system promised. With a simple flick of her fingers, the spheres began to sway before crashing down simultaneously upon everyone present. Chaos ensued immediately. "What the hell?" shouted a Slytherin student as the water soaked his robes. Hermione let out a small squeal as she tried to shield her books from the sudden sprays. Ron jumped out of his seat, shaking off the water, while Harry tried to stifle a laugh at the whole scene, which earned him a look from his professor, but he dismissed the thought that Harry was to blame since he was wet too. Even Draco Malfoy, normally so haughty, couldn't help but let out an annoyed grunt as his perfectly combed hair was flattened by the water. Snape, meanwhile, was absolutely drenched, and his face radiated barely contained fury. His eyes darted around, searching for the culprit. In an icy voice, he boomed through the classroom. "Who is responsible for this?" A tense silence fell over the class. No one dared to speak, as they were all equally wet and flustered. Snape closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply as if trying to control his temper. Then, with an elegant flick of his wand, he instantly dried himself and ordered, "All of you. Once out. Dry your books and robes before they're ruined." The students, one by one, began to use the drying spell that Snape showed them. Sicarium. Celine, watching from her hidden corner, smiled. Although she hadn't intended to get the books wet, the chance to learn a practical spell like this was an unexpected bonus. While everyone was busy drying off, the system popped into her head with a notification. "Mission accomplished. Congratulations, Celine. Your reward is an advanced spell. Ice claws involve wrapping your fingers in water and freezing them. They can also be fired at an opponent or sliced apart. You can use this to your advantage, being small and imperceptible, they can be hidden up your sleeve. Furthermore, as a bonus, you've learned Sicarium magical quick-drying," Celine said. Celine couldn't help but smile broadly. This was a complete success, she thought. Although she knew she had risked a lot by messing with her own father, the satisfaction of achieving her goal and learning something new made it all worthwhile. From across the classroom, Snape frowned as he watched his students. Though he couldn't identify the culprit, He had a strange feeling that something else was going on, something completely beyond his understanding. Celine silently slipped out of the classroom, leaving behind a soaked and confused potions classroom, and a professor who seemed more determined than ever to discover what was happening in his castle. Celine walked through the corridors, still enveloped in active stealth, though aware that the ghosts could see her perfectly. This annoyance led her to think about the scientific invisibility formula the system had mentioned. Perhaps that would be her best tool to avoid being seen by those ethereal beings. She saw a broom closet and went inside to talk. "System, I want to buy that invisibility formula. How many bottles can I purchase?" The system processed the question for a moment before responding. "You can purchase up to 3 bottles per transaction. Each bottle offers invisibility for approximately 6 hours, but remember, the formula only affects the body, not clothing or other items." "Perfect," Celine said excitedly. "This will be interesting." As she checked the purchase, a question popped into her head. "By the way, what information do you have about this Lord Adrian of Lily?" The system remained eerily silent before responding coldly. "No information is available about him. He is a completely unknown factor. Caution is advised." Celine frowned. "Nothing? Not even historical records of your family or their exploits?" "Nothing." "That's weird." The system's warning only fueled his curiosity. If no one knew anything about him, then Lord Adrian was someone he definitely needed to investigate. But first, he wanted to test the formula. And what better subject than that mysterious phantom? "Very well, system. Tell me how to activate the formula. Is it enough to drink it, or do I have to do something else?" "Just swallow it. The metallic taste might be a little unpleasant, but the effect is instantaneous." Celine gave a determined smile. "I hope Lord Adrian is ready for this little experiment," she continued on her way until Celine walked through the castle corridors and saw a place she recognized as the entrance where the kind but clumsy half-giant kept that spider. She decided to go in and got under a table to talk quietly to the system, her mind occupied with bold strategies and risky possibilities. "So, if I put the Ravenclaw headband into the pocket reality, would it break the curse?" he asked with a sly glint in his eyes. The system responded immediately. "Affirmative. Removing her from the castle would break the curse. However, I must warn you that doing so now could benefit Voldemort, as the curse also has a negative effect on him because he occupies the position he cursed." Celine frowned, lost in thought. "Then I'd better leave the tiara where it is. I'm not going to do that noseless little brat any favors." "A wise decision," the system replied coldly. "However, if you wish to gain power for future challenges, I suggest you steal the mandrakes. With their juice, you could create a potion that would considerably increase your strength." "And what exactly would that give me?" "It would allow you to develop a dimensional storage system. Initially limited to the size of a closet, but with practice it could be expanded." Celine raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A dimensional warehouse. Now that would be useful. But stealing mandrakes sounds complicated, with all the noise they make and the risk of fainting. The system suggests using earplugs and stealth." The young Snape gave a sly smile. "Well, it seems I'll have to make a nighttime visit to the greenhouse. But first, I'll need those earplugs. And perhaps a good escape plan." Celine stopped dead in her tracks mid-route through the castle, her thoughts racing with strategies for stealing the mandrakes. The idea of using her magic bag to carry all the plants, pots and all, seemed brilliant. She wouldn't have to deal with the weight or the mandrake's dangerous shriek, but she knew she had valuable things to the room of requirement before doing this, she muttered to herself. The system interrupted its planning with an alarming warning. "You will need to obtain unicorn blood to survive consuming mandrake juice." Celine froze. "What do you mean, survive?" "Mandrake juice is extremely potent, especially the formula you will drink. Consuming it will put your body under extreme physical and magical stress. Without unicorn blood to stabilize your system, you could perish." Celine swallowed, feeling the weight of the mission grow even heavier. "This is madness," she muttered, frowning. "Isn't there a less lethal alternative?" None that generates results as effective as mandrake juice. Celine sighed in frustration. Fine, system. Then I'll have to earn a unicorn's trust. But I'm not going to kill it, is that clear? Of course. Unicorn blood can be extracted without causing harm if done with patience and care. Young Snape narrowed her eyes, determined. I'll have to think carefully about how to approach one of them without harming it. But first, let's get those mandrakes. As Snape's daughter made her way back to the room of requirement, she spotted a large rat and tried to catch it as food for her snake. She froze for a moment, watching as the rat she had attempted to capture suddenly transformed into an anthropomorphic figure, a man with mouse-like features, dirty and nervous. Fortunately, her stealth remained active, keeping her hidden from the treacherous prowler. Wormtail. He thought to himself, a flash of anger in his eyes. He remembered well the story he had read and heard about him, the traitor who had betrayed the Potters. The subject, without noticing anything, transformed back into a disgusting rat and quickly scurried away around a corner of the castle. Celine clenched her fists with determination. I forgot about you, but don't worry. I'll make sure you pay later, she thought coldly. Upon arriving at the room of requirement, the room took shape according to his wishes, a space filled with tools, obstacles, and magical details to recreate his next objective, the theft of the mandrakes. He activated his pocket reality to simulate every step of the process, from the necessary stealth to the careful handling of the plants without unleashing their deadly scream. Perfect practice, he murmured, moving his hands with precision. I'll do this job flawlessly. The system intervened. Good strategy. Remember to synchronize your weight management spells and activate your hearing protection. Celine nodded. Tonight, the greenhouse will be mine. And afterward. Perhaps I'll settle the score with a traitorous rat. Celine considered whether to carry out the robbery during the afternoon snack after classes but changed her mind to do it later. She moved with precision and calm through the greenhouse, the cool evening air beginning to darken. She had decided to commit the robbery at 6 o'clock, during dinner, when the castle and its surroundings were quietest and emptiest. Professor Sprout, always cautious, had left a silent alarm linked to the greenhouses, but Celine had already anticipated possible setbacks. Come on, mandrakes, come here, she whispered as she waved her hands and activated the magical levitation. The heavy pots floated precisely into her magic bag. Each mandrake slid smoothly into the magical interior of the bag, emitting slight tremors that Celine controlled with firm movements. Without letting her guard down, she noticed some venomous tentacles extending menacingly from the corners of the greenhouse. They could be useful. Or at least sell well, he thought. With skill, she used her magic to sever them at their bases and floated them directly into the bag. Their tentacles twitched violently, but the spell kept them under control. Perfect heist, Celine congratulated herself as she firmly closed the bag and rose into the air, leaving the greenhouse just before anyone could reach her. However, just as she was en route to the room of requirement, the system warned her. Professor Sprout has been alerted. There is movement on the grounds. Celine frowned. Then I'd better disappear quickly. And flew straight to the safety of the hidden room, her prize secured and her mind already working on the next step of the plan. Professor Sprout was red with indignation as she stared at the empty greenhouse. The mandrakes and the poisonous tentacles had vanished without a trace. This is an outrage. Who would dare such a theft at Hogwarts? My mandrakes are not mere plants, they are magical treasures, she exclaimed furiously. The professors present exchanged tense glances. Phileas Flitwick, ever meticulous, raised his wand and conjured a powerful revelio. The golden images of the scene materialized in the air, plants floating without apparent explanation, but no trace of the thief. Curious. There's no visible figure, Flitwick remarked, rubbing his chin. Peeves, perhaps, suggested Minerva McGonagall, though deep down she knew the poltergeist wasn't that subtle. Dumbledore arrived at that moment, his expression calm but his eyes shining with concern. He raised his wand, uttering a spell far more complex and ancient than Flitwick's. The golden image reformed, but this time, it appeared as a shapeless, floating mass, almost like a distortion of the air itself. Interesting. Dumbledore murmured, his face grave. Even with enhanced magic, something or someone remains hidden. Is it possible that it's not conventional magic? McGonagall asked, intrigued. Perhaps. Whatever it is, it's worrying, admitted Albus. Something or someone at Hogwarts possesses a means of stealth that surpasses our usual spells. Meanwhile, Celine, Severus's daughter, using one of the tricks the system gave her, the shadow reflection allowed her to hear what they were saying. Now safely in the room of requirement, she examined her lute with a satisfied smile. The system informed her of the professor's bewilderment. What you did is beyond the bounds of the ordinary, even for them, the system told him. Perfect, Celine whispered, stroking one of the venomous tentacles. The more bewildered they are, the better for me. But before she could relax, the system gave her another mission, which was none other than stealing Snape's supplies. Not my father, the little witch tried to say, but the system interrupted her. It's necessary for your advancement and you'll win rewards. And so she went to where Severus kept his treasure. Celine landed softly in front of the door to her father Severus Snape's private storeroom. The cold dungeon air enveloped her, and the shadows seemed to lengthen as if they were watching her. Seriously, system? She whispered, a mixture of disbelief and nervousness in her voice. My own father? This is too much. It's necessary for your advancement, the system replied again, in that tone that always irritated her. The rewards are worth the risk. Celine sighed. There was something unsettling about stealing from her father, but she knew the system never suggested anything without reason. Okay, let's get to this. He studied the door. Magical runes glowed faintly around the frame. It was clear that Severus spared no expense on security. Sealing enchantments, intruder barriers, and dark magic detectors protected the warehouse. This is going to be complicated, she murmured, touching her chin thoughtfully. Recommendation: manipulate enchantments from an inverted reflection. Use shadow reflection to project yourself behind the barrier. Sure, because spending more magic is exactly what I need right now, Celine grumbled sarcastically. With a resigned sigh, he invoked the shadow reflection. His spectral figure materialized on the other side of the door, expending more magic. From there, he could manipulate the enchantments without directly activating them. One by one, the runes began to fade, clearing the path. When the final barrier dissolved, Celine quietly opened the door, entering her father's sanctuary of potion ingredients. Rows of flasks glowed dimly in the magical light: dragon bone powder, mermaid scales, phoenix tears. A true master potion maker's treasure. This is amazing, Celine whispered, marveling. The system interrupted his astonishment. Quick, grab what you can before someone discovers you. With swift movements, she filled her magic bag with carefully selected ingredients. Just as she was about to leave, she heard footsteps echoing in the hallway. Who's there? Severus Snape's icy voice cut through the air. Celine held her breath, her heart pounding. She had to decide quickly whether to risk being blown away or use her shadow reflection to distract her own father. The system suggested she use the glitter powder trick, which would blind him for a while without harming him. So, with a flick of her wrist, Celine threw a luminous storm of golden light at the potion's master, preventing him from seeing anything. Her daughter left without incident, but saddened. Celine arrived at the room of requirement, her heart still pounding. She had left undetected, but the guilt tormented her. I can't believe I did that, she muttered as she emptied her magic bag full of rare ingredients. Mission successful, the system announced cheerfully. Congratulations, you have received an upgrade to your pocket reality and access to new advanced recipes. Yes, congratulations to me for almost causing my own father's death. Celine rolled her eyes. Will he be okay? Master Snape is physically unharmed, but his pride has been severely compromised. Celine let out a sigh. I already know that, system. After a while, Snape saw that all his treasure, collected over years, had disappeared and he fainted, waking up in the infirmary. They thought he had been harmed by some kind of curse, but that wasn't it. As they were getting organized, the echo of the news began to resonate even in the hidden room. Professor Snape's storeroom has been robbed. Everything is gone. He was found unconscious. Celine gritted her teeth. Guilt mingled with the satisfaction of having completed a difficult mission. This is going to cause a stir. I hope they don't find out. Recommendation: keep a low profile. I suggest avoiding direct confrontations with Professor Snape in the coming weeks. Good idea, Celine replied, although she knew she would eventually face the consequences. Deep down, she was determined to give everything back someday. But first she had to learn, improve and become stronger, even though what was coming was to rest. The somber reflection was draining her. But then Everly's ghost appeared in the multipurpose room, searching for her, or so the young Snape believed. Luckily, she noticed him first and he was out of her sight for the moment, but that wouldn't last long, and she decided to retreat into her pocket reality. Celine sighed in relief as she closed her reality pocket behind her. The now improved space had the comfort of a warm and safe room, with a soft bed and charming details, a magical crackling fireplace and walls that gently changed color according to her mood. "This is the life," he murmured as he sank down onto the bed, his snake Nasha already coiled up in a soft pillow. Safe environment confirmed. No hostile presences detected, the system announced in its mechanical but reassuring tone. Well, a worry-free night. At last. Despite the comfort, his mind couldn't help but wander. He recalled the face of Lord Adrian Everly's ghost searching in the shadows of the room of requirement. That ghost won't give up easily, Celine thought. But it can't get in here. This place is completely disconnected from Hogwarts. Nasha raised her head, hissing softly. Yes, I know, I should sleep, Celine said, stroking his head. But it's hard not to think about what comes next. As she closed her eyes, young Snape allowed herself a small whisper. I guess I'll always have to be one step ahead of everyone. And so, in the safety of her own dimension, Celine drifted off into deep sleep, far removed from the intrigues, the ghosts, and the consequences of her recent mischief. While Celine rested in the tranquility of her pocket reality, Hogwarts Castle was a hive of tension. The professors, with serious expressions and wands at the ready, kept watch over the students lined up in the Great Hall. The long tables had disappeared, leaving room for multicolored sleeping bags scattered across the floor. The murmur of hundreds of voices died away whenever someone coughed, especially near Quirrell, who reeked of garlic. His turban, always suspicious, seemed to conceal more than just bandages, but no one dared say so openly. This is ridiculous, Draco Malfoy complained, covering his nose with a silver-green scarf. Even at Malfoy Manor we haven't had to sleep like this, reeking of garlic. Hermione Granger whispered to Harry and Ron. It must be because of what happened in the greenhouse. Someone stole all the mandrakes and poisonous plants. And what does that have to do with bringing us here? Ron asked, frowning. This is torture, especially with Professor walking garlic. At that, Snape, who could no longer tolerate the stench, told Quirrell that it would be better to patrol other areas of the castle, and each left and went his own way, Severus happy to breathe fresh air. Meanwhile, Dumbledore watched from his high seat, his eyes narrowed and his expression deep in thought. The recent disturbances in the castle troubled him. First, the mysterious theft of the valuable plants under Pomona Sprout's very protective spell. Then, the unsettling appearance of an intruder whom even the most powerful Revelio had been unable to fully unmask. Albus, McGonagall murmured beside him, do you think this has anything to do with the Philosopher's Stone? The director stroked his silver beard. Perhaps, Minerva. Perhaps. In the castle's underground, Voldemort, hidden behind Quirrell's body, roared in the nervous professor's mind. Useless. This can't be a coincidence. If anyone else is looking for the stone, you must eliminate them immediately. Quirrell swallowed, sweating profusely. Yes, my lord. I will do what is necessary. While Hogwarts slept under tension and surveillance, Celine remained oblivious, safe and isolated, although fate would soon push her back into chaos, a chaos she could use as a ladder to glory or her tomb for eternity. Celine stretched, yawning and smiling as she felt completely refreshed. Sleeping without a care had been a true luxury, but her tranquility vanished as she remembered her next task, preparing the mandrake juice. Well, system, I suppose you'll guide me through making that brew, or do I need to review the material you gave me?" he asked as he gathered his things. "I will guide you," the system replied in its mechanical but reliable tone. "But first you must obtain the unicorn's blood. The juice must be consumed freshly prepared, its effectiveness fades quickly." Celine sighed as her mind began to formulate a plan. She recalled her earlier idea, using leeches to obtain the blood without directly confronting the unicorn. "Leeches first, right?" he muttered, wondering where he might find them. Perhaps near a pool in the Forbidden Forest or even in the castle's potion storerooms. But now that he remembered raiding that place last night, he hadn't seen anything resembling a jar of leeches, so he'd have to look outside. Correct. The blood must be fresh and pure. With determination, Celine set off. If she was going to do this, she had to act quickly and precisely, but first, looking at her reflection in a dusty mirror, she saw it begin to change and then vanish. Flying stealthily through the castle corridors, she headed towards the area near the greenhouses, where she knew there were small ponds of water. Upon arriving, he found a pool with the characteristic shimmer of aquatic life. Without wasting a moment, he cast a pull spell similar to Accio, but also effective on living beings, causing leeches to rise from the water in small, viscous jets. He skillfully trapped them in magically sealed vials. To apply cleansing magic and eliminate any pathogens that might contaminate the blood he was about to drink. "Well, step 1 complete," she said satisfied, then she again pronounced atrahere, from the Latin to attract, pointing at some stones that flew towards her, and then said repulsum, from the Latin to repel to throw them far away, and smiled. Although she could already levitate things, these new spells were faster and more useful in combat, like a kind of archer. Now all that remained was to find the unicorn. But the system was right, he had to proceed with caution. The blood of a unicorn was sacred, and any mistake could have dire consequences. Celine floated gracefully through the dense vegetation of the Forbidden Forest, barely touching the ground as she moved silently. The air was thick, heavy with the earthy scent of damp wood and the whispers of unseen creatures. She recognized a clearing that seemed familiar, the very spot where Voldemort would attack a unicorn and Harry would be saved by a centaur. He stopped, carefully observing the terrain. Perhaps it would be wise to prepare some traps. Just in case, she murmured to herself. The system responded in its direct tone. Recommendation: place temporary capture and magic alert runes on the surrounding trees. Celine smiled slightly. Magical traps would be useful, but she needed something immediate to lure the unicorn without arousing suspicion. "And how do you suggest I call a unicorn without seeming threatening?" "Use the magic flute and place a good amount of sweets on the ground. Unicorns have a particular fondness for magical sweets and enchanted fruits." "Sweets? Who would have thought?" Celine laughed as she took out her flute and began to play a soft, enveloping melody. The good thing about enchanted instruments was that they played by themselves. The ethereal sound of the flute floated through the air, creating ripples that seemed to calm even the most restless creatures of the forest. All around, the trees seemed to lean slightly, as if listening intently. Celine scattered magic candies and small enchanted fruits in the clearing, creating an appetizing path. "I hope this works," she murmured, remaining alert. While she waited, her mind raced. If the unicorn appeared, the leeches would be ready. All that remained was to trust that her stealth and the melody would be captivating enough. The young Snape took the leeches out of the jars and gently floated them with her levitation over the sweets. After not long a young unicorn, perhaps a foal, arrived attracted by the sweets which it ate without delay, and Celine gently let the bloodsuckers descend, who did their work without delay. The unicorn approached her. Celine gently stroked the silvery back of the young unicorn, whose eyes shone with a mixture of curiosity and innocence. The leeches discreetly did their work, filling themselves with the precious liquid without causing any visible harm. "Relax, little one, I'm almost done," Celine whispered softly as she gently removed the leeches. She quickly placed them back in their jars, making sure they were tightly sealed. The unicorn, satisfied with the sweets, rubbed its head against her before trotting into the foliage, disappearing into the thick of the forest. But her peace was short-lived. "You shouldn't be here, child," said a deep, calm voice behind her. Celine turned quickly to face Firenze, the centaur with golden hair and a piercing gaze. His imposing presence and the firmness in his voice made it clear he was in no mood for negotiations. "And you?" Celine replied in a defiant tone, although maintaining a neutral posture. Firenze observed her closely, as if he could see through her secrets. "This forest is not safe for humans, especially in dark times. The stars have spoken of malevolent presences." Celine sighed. "I was just exploring a bit. I didn't do anything wrong." Firenze raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Unicorns don't approach just anyone, and you summoned them. That says a lot about you, for better or for worse." Celine decided not to reveal anything about the leeches. "I'll return to the castle, thanks for the warning." "Do it quickly, child," the centaur warned, his expression turning more serious. "Not everyone in this forest would look kindly on you for what you just did, though the unicorn didn't complain." Celine nodded, floating gently toward the clearing's exit, thinking to herself, mission accomplished. Now all that's left is to prepare the mandrake juice. The good thing is that the centaur saw her, not in her original form, but he should still learn a trick to erase his memory. However, while he was thinking that, fate placed none other than the master of positions in front of her, and he seriously asked her what she was doing there and what house she belonged to. Celine could only avoid looking him in the eyes and run as fast as she could, since flying in front of him was out of the question. He might associate her with what happened in the greenhouses. Celine felt her heart race as she ran through the woods, Snape's cold voice echoing in her mind. "What are you doing here? Which house are you from?" Looking her father in the eye would have been her undoing. Her intuition warned her that he might read more than she intended to reveal. So she opted for the most sensible solution, to run away. Snape, his black cloak billowing behind him, followed closely behind, his quick, firm footsteps echoing on the forest floor. "Stop right now," he demanded in a blood-curdling voice. But Celine had no intention of stopping. She increased the distance with quick, precise movements, dodging roots and low branches. Snape was fast, but Celine had an ace up her sleeve. Without hesitation, she activated the blink, teleporting herself a few meters ahead. The sudden disappearance of her figure made Snape stop abruptly, his black eyes searching furiously among the trees. "Where the hell?" he muttered, clearly annoyed. Celine appeared from behind a tree, breathing heavily but with a triumphant smile on her lips. "I'm sorry, Father, but I'm not ready for explanations yet." As he moved in the wrong direction, Celine took the opportunity to float gently out of the forest, avoiding making the slightest noise. The system spoke to him in a neutral tone. "You escaped, but you should consider learning a mind concealment or memory spell. It might come in handy in the future." "Yes, I definitely will," Celine whispered as she returned to the room of requirement, feeling the adrenaline still coursing through her body. "Next time, I'll be better prepared." In the room of requirement, Celine listened to the system's instructions and saw visual examples of what she should do, but decided to make some modifications using her pocket reality, where she would use Muggle methods and tools. Celine watched with satisfaction as her machine, created in pocket reality, did the heavy lifting. The conveyor belt moved forward, carrying the mandrakes in a line. Upon entering the airtight cubic chamber, the system activated the safety protocol. All the air was expelled, leaving absolute silence and ensuring that the mandrake's death scream could not be transmitted. The mechanical tongs descended with surgical precision, tearing the mandrakes from their pots as jets of water thoroughly cleaned them. The twisted, grotesque roots writhed uselessly in the void, unable to make a sound. Celine smiled as she watched the cleaned mandrakes being tossed directly into a giant, high-powered blender. The blades spun at breakneck speed, grinding the magical roots into a thick, shimmering, dark green liquid. The system confirmed. Successfully obtained mandrake juice. Maximum potency guaranteed. Celine approached the control panel and removed a glass vial filled with the valuable liquid. "Perfect," she whispered, admiring the result. The system interrupted her. "Remember that you need unicorn blood before you drink it." Celine nodded, remembering the warning. "Yes, I already have enough blood in those jars with the leeches. It was very easy and disgusting to squeeze them to get the blood." The system didn't mention if there would be any side effects from drinking that along with the juice. The system responded immediately. The mixture will be stable. However, I recommend you rest after consuming it due to the extreme stress your body could experience. Celine carefully put the vial away. Well, I think I'll be ready for the next step. This is just the beginning. Looking at the machine that was still processing the last of the mandrakes, Celine knew she had crossed an important line in her preparation. The real adventure was just beginning. Celine tried to taste a little earlier, but the herbal flavor was too strong, and knowing that time was valuable, she conjured up a funnel, the perfect tool to solve her current problem. The funnel Celine had created seemed an ingenious solution to avoid the strong herbal taste of the mandrake juice. Resolutely, she closed her eyes and let the thick liquid slide quickly down her throat. For a brief moment he felt nothing, only the slight metallic sensation left by the unicorn blood he had previously consumed. But then came the pain. Ah! She screamed as she fell to the ground, her body convulsing slightly from the wave of magical energy that invaded her. It was an inner fire, as if every cell of her being was being restructured from within. Her nails dug into her head, fighting the urge to scratch her face. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her teeth ground together violently. Damn system! He groaned between gasps. You could have warned me about the pain. The system responded with its neutral tone. Prior warning: unicorn blood prevents death, but not the pain associated with the magical restructuring of your body. The process is necessary to strengthen your magical and physical abilities. Celine cursed inwardly as she writhed on the floor of her pocket reality. Her vision blurred, but she clung to consciousness. She knew that surrendering now would be fatal. After what seemed like an eternity, the pain began to subside, leaving a feeling of emptiness and utter exhaustion in her body. Panting, Celine crawled to a wall, bracing herself with difficulty. Well, he murmured, his voice trembling. I guess I survived. The system confirmed. Process complete. Physical and magical abilities optimized. I suggest immediate rest. Celine let out a bitter laugh. Rest? Sure, as if I had time for that. Despite her exhaustion, a spark of pride shone in her eyes. She had overcome another challenge. Her body had changed, and now she was stronger. But Celine also knew something else: the real test was yet to come. Celine breathed deeply, grateful that pocket reality had adjusted so precisely to her needs. The cold floor had been replaced by a comfortable bed of soft blankets that seemed to absorb all her exhaustion. The system remained silent, respecting its recovery time. Meanwhile, in the outside world, Lord Adrian Averley traversed every corner of the castle with a fierce expression on his ghostly face. His ethereal aura seemed to unsettle the portraits, who murmured nervously in his presence. She can't just disappear like that, growled the ghost. I must find her. Elsewhere in the castle, Severus Snape strode forward, frowning, carrying various materials he had gathered from the Forbidden Forest: twisted roots, bioluminescent fungi, and a few wild mandrake leaves. His robes were somewhat soiled with forest mud, but his grim expression indicated that this was of little consequence. Near the main entrance, he bumped into Minerva McGonagall, who watched him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Severus, what's wrong? He asked in his firm but kind tone. None of your business, Minerva, he replied coldly, and Minerva McGonagall frowned. Watch your tone, Severus. And he proceeded to recount what had happened in the forest, but before he could say anything about the girl Minerva, he asked, an acromantula on the prowl, perhaps? No. This was something different. Even with all my detection spells, that girl escaped with ease. McGonagall raised an eyebrow. A student? Perhaps. But if she is, I'll make sure I find her. No one outsmarts Severus Snape without consequences. Minerva placed a hand on his arm, trying to calm him down. Don't torture yourself over it. If she really is a student, she'll turn up sooner or later. I hope for his sake he does, Snape murmured with a sharp look before continuing on his way to the dungeons, his mind full of theories and suspicions, which he decided to share with McGonagall before going to the dungeons. Meanwhile, Celine slept soundly, oblivious to the chaos she had unleashed in the castle. "Are you saying you saw a student who might be under a glamour?" said the surprised head of the Lion's House. Snape nodded slowly, his expression dark as always, but charged with an unusual tension. "That's what it looks like." She was no taller than a first-year student, but her movements were incredibly agile. She escaped with remarkable ease. That's not typical of an ordinary girl. Minerva crossed her arms, her stern gaze softening slightly. "And I suppose that's why you answered me so rudely." "I'm sorry, Minerva," Snape admitted in a grave voice, lowering his gaze slightly. "I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Everything has been a complete disaster lately. The theft of my supplies. Years of work gone, and now this." McGonagall sighed, her voice more understanding. "It's clear something strange is happening at the castle, Severus. Someone is playing with fire." "I know," he replied, his intense gaze fixed on some invisible point. "And I intend to find out who it is." "About that girl. Could you describe her in more detail?" Snape frowned, mentally reviewing what little he had seen. It's like a combination of Potter and his friends, so he suspects it wasn't his true appearance. She narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked, and after hearing him, she was surprised by Severus's revelation. Thick hair like Granger's but with a Weasley's color, fair skin. And something about his face vaguely reminded me of Potter, although his eyes. Minerva raised an eyebrow. Her eyes on Severus? Green like lilies? "No." Snape replied, "Black like mine, clearly affected by the memory, for they looked like his." "Come on, Severus." He clenched his jaw, but finally gave in. In the afternoon, Severus's daughter was strong enough to get out of bed and rudely asked the system if everything had worked, and it told her that in terms of raw power she would be almost at the level of Percy Weasley. "Percy!" Celine almost shouted indignantly. "Remember that Percy is a very dedicated fifth-year student and a prefect. Besides, you're still increasing your power, but you must work hard to advance further. At least I'll easily surpass the first years and maybe the fourth years, with caution." "And what about the dimensional warehouse?" The system responded in its neutral, almost mocking tone. "The dimensional storage is now available, though for now it's only the size of a small wardrobe. You'll be able to expand it as your magic and abilities grow." Celine clicked her tongue as she mentally inspected her new ability. She visualized the space, indeed the size of a slightly larger than normal wardrobe, and began placing shelving units that she could arrange to her liking. "It's not bad for a start," he muttered, though with some annoyance, "but I hope you don't give me any more painful surprises like last time." "The pain was an inevitable part of the process," the system replied coldly. "But you survived. Now you're stronger." "Yes, well, thanks for that," Celine said sarcastically. "Is there anything else I should do?" "It would be advisable to practice using the dimensional storage to quickly transport and retrieve items. You should also consider strengthening your magical control, especially to improve your stealth enchantments." Celine nodded, reflecting. "All right, then I'll start by securing my potions and valuables. The last thing I want is to lose them if someone manages to force their way into the room of requirement." He exited his pocket reality. With a flick of her wrist, she began transferring her magical materials to the dimensional storeroom. Flasks of potions, valuable ingredients, and magical tools floated gently into the invisible space that only she could perceive. "What's next?" Celine asked with determination. "You'll continue to receive missions as you progress. But be careful, Lord Adrian Everley is still looking for you." Celine snorted, and wondered how the system knew that. Did it have a radar function or something? Well, let him keep looking. I have a whole world to conquer, so to speak. Severus's daughter, in the Chamber of Requirement, was moving everything of value to her new dimensional storage and asked the system how it could know that Everley was looking for her. The system told her that since their last encounter, it had updated a detection function, but it only alerted to ghostly presences within a 7-meter radius. "Okay," Celine said, "and you'll let me know if he's nearby." The system responded and alerted her, saying, "Lord Adrian Everley is approaching." Celine tensed as she heard Lord Adrian Averley's solemn, floating voice echo in the room of requirement. The system had kept its promise, but the warning had arrived just before the meeting. "Miss Snape, I have finally found you to talk," said the ghost, its ethereal figure passing through the wall like a pale shadow. The young witch frowned, remaining resolute as her mind analyzed possible escape routes. "What if I don't want to talk?" Celine replied in a dry tone, while mentally securing her connection to the dimensional warehouse, ready to hide or defend whatever was necessary. Averley smiled enigmatically, crossing his arms. He has no choice. It's curious how someone so young has unleashed such a whirlwind of chaos in such a short time. Stealing mandrakes, sneaking into the forbidden forest, and let's not even mention the incident in the greenhouse. Your talents are exceptional, but dangerous. So what? Celine raised an eyebrow, feigning disinterest. Are you here to lecture me, Mr. Ghost? The ghost took an ethereal step towards her, its presence cold and unsettling. No. I've come to make you an offer. Celine crossed her arms. What kind of offer? Sharing knowledge. You're someone who values power, am I wrong? And I was a magician before I became what you see now. I can teach you things even your teachers don't know. In exchange for something, of course. And what would that something be? Celine asked suspiciously. Averley bowed his head. Access to your private space, so to speak. I've seen fragments of its existence and it intrigues me. Celine gritted her teeth, her mind racing. Could she trust an intriguing ghost like that? Or would it be better to find a way to eliminate its threat? While Snape pondered the system, she informed him that only she could control the pocket reality and could imprison the ghost there if necessary. This prompted Celine to show Lord Adrian what she wanted, and he crossed the entrance to the pocket reality. When she appeared, she wore an expression of astonishment unusual for a ghost accustomed to the extraordinary. The vast and pristine dimension that Celine had shaped stretched before them, with modern structures floating in an unreal sky and machinery moving with harmonious motions. "This is impressive," murmured the spectre as it floated around the area, inspecting the details. "Is this Muggle?" Celine smiled with a mixture of pride and defiance. "A combination of magic and science," he replied confidently. "Or, if you prefer, a science so advanced it seems like magic." Lord Adrian tilted his head, pondering his words. "The wizarding world is very behind in many things," added young Snape. "For example, they haven't even been to the moon yet." The ghost let out a soft, ethereal laugh. "That's true. A feat we, with all our magic, could never achieve. Wizards have always underestimated Muggles. I fear that pride blinds even the wisest." Celine walked purposefully beside him, feeling in control of the situation. "Here, I have absolute power. Nothing enters or leaves without my permission." Averley looked at her with genuine admiration. "You're dangerous, Miss Snape. But that's a quality I admire." The witch smiled with a glimmer of satisfaction. "So? Satisfied with what you see?" The ghost floated lightly toward her. "More than satisfied. But I must warn you, young lady, if the wizards come to know the potential of this, there will be many interested in taking it from you." "I know," Celine said coldly. "That's why I'm ready to defend him." Lord Adrian smiled with a certain complicity. "Perhaps we can help each other after all. How about you become my teacher?" Celine asks the ghost lord. Adrian looks at her and accepts without hesitation. "Well, little one, we'll start your classes tomorrow, and I hope you do your best." "I don't like wasting my time, even though I've been dead for a long time," he says, and leaves. Celine watched as Lord Adrian Averley floated away through the entrance of her pocket reality, leaving a sense of triumph in the air. She smiled contentedly as she thought about the lessons that would begin the next day. A ghost for a teacher. My life is definitely getting interesting, she thought to herself. Meanwhile, Lord Adrian moved through walls and corridors with spectral fluidity. His expression, serene at first, turned sour when he came face to face with Albus Dumbledore, who seemed to have been expecting him. Lord Adrian Averley, the director greeted in a calm and friendly voice. "May I assume your search was fruitful?" The ghost's disembodied eyes shone with resentment. "I would never tell you, usurper," he spat coldly. The air around them seemed to grow colder at his sharp tone. Without waiting for a reply, the ghost vanished, passing through the nearest wall. Dumbledore sighed deeply, adjusting his half-moon glasses. "Always so kind, Lord Adrian," he murmured somewhat melancholically before continuing his thoughtful walk through the castle. Meanwhile, Celine was preparing for what promised to be an interesting day. A ghost teacher. And one with a past full of secrets. She was definitely not writing just any story. Potter's half-sister wanted to wander around the castle to see what had happened while she was up to her usual antics, discovering that Harry was already on the Quidditch team. That meant she hadn't seen Neville's incident with his Remembrall being taken by Draco. It didn't matter anyway. It wasn't like she could announce her presence. "Mission alert, the system says. You must obtain troll parts for positions." Celine stopped her walk around the castle upon hearing the system alert. "Troll parts? Seriously?" he asked, frowning, stopping in a corner away for advanced potions. The system replied in its usual impassive tone. "Okay. But can I beat a troll with my current magic?" he inquired, somewhat cautiously. "No," the system replied sharply. "But you can buy nitroglycerin and use it strategically." Celine blinked in disbelief. "Nitroglycerin? Isn't that dangerous?" "Extremely," the system confirmed. "But effective against trolls. You just need a precise throw, and the problem will be solved." The young Snape was lost in thought. The idea was completely insane, but what did she have to lose? Besides her life. So she decided against it, but then she remembered Hermione. "Very well," he agreed with a reckless smile. "Let's do it the Muggle way then." He immediately brought the explosive through the system, visualizing a plan in his mind: ambush the troll in an enclosed space, secure the nitroglycerin charges at strategic points, and detonate it before it could react. "Do you at least have a manual for not blowing me to bits?" he asked sarcastically. "Of course, I'm attaching the detailed instructions now," replied the system. Celine sighed and began to plot her daring plan, determined to do whatever it took to complete the mission. Even if it meant playing with fire. Before going after the troll, Snape opens her dimensional storage room to take a small amount of the invisibility potion and stores her clothes there, as she won't become invisible in them. She also leaves her shoes inside with the nitroglycerin. Celine arrived barefoot at the baths, invisible thanks to the potion, her clothes safely stored in her dimensional warehouse. The cold, damp floor sent a shiver down her spine, but her resolve was unwavering. She mentally held her plan like a precise roadmap. The reading about nitroglycerin echoed in his mind: 10 to 20 grams are enough to destroy a tree trunk 50 centimeters in diameter. No mistakes, he whispered to himself, as he assessed the situation. What he hadn't expected was to encounter several trolls lined up. Their enormous, stinking bodies, barely covered by animal skins, blocked the path. Each one wielded clubs as thick as tree trunks. "Really?" she huffed under her breath. The system hadn't warned her about this. Recommended adaptation. Use the Attrahir and Repulsum spells together to launch the nitroglycerin and destroy them with the detonation, the system suggested coldly. Celine nodded, strategically positioning herself away from them. She opened her dimensional storage, focusing on the air around her. Attrahir drew the franz without needing to touch them herself. Repulsum. She used it to throw them at the trolls. A shockwave enveloped the trolls with each explosion, tossing them around like heavy puppets. Those that weren't completely smashed to pieces were dragged toward the center of the bathroom. The spells demanded intense concentration, but he managed it. The trolls who were still alive huddled together, confused, growling with their weapons raised. Without wasting any time, Celine took her nitroglycerin from the dimensional storage, carefully measuring the amount. "This should be enough," he said as he threw the small troll charges at them. With one last movement, he retreated far enough before the final detonation, and the system congratulated him. But he didn't hear it, for the roar of the explosion echoed throughout the castle, shaking the walls. Fragments of tile and smoke filled the air. When the echo of the explosion subsided, Celine coughed, slowly opening her eyes. The trolls, or what remained of them, lay motionless, unconscious, or worse, surrounded by rubble. Mission accomplished, she murmured contentedly as the system confirmed her success once again. Efficient but noisy, the system commented in a neutral tone. Better noisy than dead, Celine replied as she carefully gathered the necessary troll parts and placed them in her dimensional warehouse, ready to return victorious to the room of requirement. As Celine finished collecting the troll parts, she noticed Hermione staring at her. She looked at her, and Snape checked herself, and it was visible. Celine felt heat rush to her face when she saw Hermione completely paralyzed, her eyes wide and her face as red as a tomato. The situation was surreal: blood in small cuts, scattered troll remains, and, of course, the small detail of her being completely naked. "What are you looking at?" Celine shouted, crossing her arms over her chest, furious and embarrassed. Hermione stammered, unable to articulate a coherent word. No. This. He managed to say before staring at the ground. "System. Because I'm visible," Celine demanded. The system tells her that she had cuts from the impact of several tile fragments and that the duration of the formula varied with the expulsion of bodily fluids, whether sweat, tears, urine, or blood would make it last less time, and you're telling me this now? Snape shouts, "The formula isn't a scam," the system replies. "Now it works properly," she grumbled, still annoyed. Hermione, still blushing, looked nervously at the scattered troll fragments. What was that?" she whispered, trying to change the subject. Celine took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "None of your business, Granger," she said haughtily, though grateful that the subject had changed, "but there were trolls. This is dangerous. I must tell the teachers." Hermione tried to turn away. "Oh, you won't," Celine warned him. "You owe me your life, remember." "Are you going to curse me?" Hermione stepped back, frightened. Celine snorted. "No, but let's just say it would be better for you if you forgot what you saw today. Trolls, explosions. And definitely me without clothes." Hermione swallowed and nodded, still visibly shaken.
I guess I can just pretend I was never here."
Celine sighed in relief. "Good girl, Granger. And if they ask? You were in the library. You're always there, aren't you?" Hermione nodded again and ran off as if Voldemort himself were chasing her. "Mission accomplished," the system said mockingly. "Shut up." Celine growled as she quickly left the place, making sure that no trace of her presence remained. Celine, after saving Hermione and making sure she didn't say a word, left. But as she exited the bathroom, the system warned her that Albus, Minerva, and the one parasitized by Voldemort were approaching. "What about my father?" she thought. Snape wasn't there. Perhaps there was a change in history because of her actions. She simply activated stealth and quickly left the bathroom, but her misfortune was far from over. The impact was unavoidable. Celine crashed into the chest of her father, Severus Snape, who, his black robes billowing slightly, grabbed her arm before she could escape. "Who are you?" demanded the potion's master, his dark eyes fixed on her. There was more than surprise in his voice, disbelief and fury, which turned to shame when he noticed her lack of clothing. Celine cursed inwardly. Her invisibility potion had a fatal flaw, or perhaps her stealth could be easily broken. Without a doubt, every trick she possessed had a defect. "Nobody." She tried to answer in a neutral voice, but her tone betrayed her. Severus's eyes narrowed as he studied her more closely. The resemblance between them was undeniable. They had the same jet-black hair, pale skin, and emerald green eyes. "This is impossible," Severus murmured, letting go of her arm, but still staring at her as if she were a hallucination. Celine felt the words catch in her throat. What could she say to him? "Hello, I'm your unknown or abandoned daughter?" No, that definitely wouldn't work. The system interrupted his thoughts. "Recommendation, escape. But what a brilliant idea you have, system," Celine said with all the sarcasm she could muster. Celine gritted her teeth. She couldn't be discovered by others, but she also couldn't allow him to hold her captive. "Back off, "Father!" he shouted firmly as he threw the luminescent powder at him once more, which blinded him and illuminated the hallway with an intense light. Severus stepped back, momentarily blinded. Taking advantage of the moment, Celine activated her stealth again and ran through the corridors with her heart racing. "This is getting out of control," he muttered as he slipped through a side door into a hidden hallway. The system responded coldly. "I warned you that your actions would have consequences. You gave me a mission which I completed," she replied, then huffed as she tried to catch her breath. Severus Snape, still blinded, stood in the corridor, frowning as the light faded. "This isn't over," he murmured in a grave voice, determined to discover who that mysterious young woman was. Severus Snape's world had just changed forever. He tried to maintain his usual cold composure, but failed miserably when he remembered those familiar green eyes that pierced his soul like daggers. Snape felt his world crumble. That word, "father," disarmed him in a way that not even the worst curse could. What kind of dark trick was this? Yet something inside him whispered that this was no mere illusion. Then, the echo of screams and the thumping of footsteps reverberated through the corridors of Hogwarts. The troll alarm had somehow ended. Any other professor would have rushed toward the danger, but Snape had other priorities. In a decisive move, she went to the sealed tower. The names and secrets of the Hogwarts students were recorded in the Quill of Acceptance and the Book of Admissions, magical objects jealously guarded in the sealed tower. If that girl was who she claimed to be, those artifacts would confirm it. With a swift movement, Snape transformed. His body shrank, his bones creaked, and a pair of membranous wings sprouted from his back. With a sharp screech, the black bat that was his animagus form took flight. Few people knew that Snape was an unregistered animagus. He disliked his form, but the secrecy had proven useful more than once. She traversed the dark corridors and spiraled upward toward the Forbidden Tower. The magical wards crackled at her presence, but vanished before her flawless magic. She landed on a Gothic window-sill and, with an elegant movement, reasserted her human form. The Quill of Acceptance and the Book of Admissions rested on marble pedestals, emitting a soft golden light. Snape advanced toward them, his heart pounding. "Let's see if you're real," he murmured, opening the heavy book. He searched through the recent names. And then he saw it. There was the girl's name, inscribed in magical ink, Celine Wood, formerly Celine Snape. Her breath caught in her throat. Marlin. Lily's green eyes and the jet-black hair she so hated seeing in the mirror combined in that small figure who called him father. Severus Snape stood motionless, his mind racing as he stared at the name that glowed faintly on the ancient parchment, Celine Snape Evans, currently Celine Wood. The year of birth, 1981, made his heart pound, almost suffocating him. It didn't make sense. Lily had died in 1981, leaving Harry alone. How could this girl even exist? He didn't remember having a child with her. And yet, the admissions book never lied. Something stung her robes. She looked down and saw a dark stain. Blood. The girl had suffered several cuts when she found her, probably from running through the chaotic corridors after the troll's alarm. Snape narrowed his eyes. "This will do," he murmured with determination. A lineage test. If what he suspected was true, the blood would confirm everything. He couldn't allow anyone at Hogwarts to know about this investigation. With Dumbledore always one step ahead and rumors spreading like wildfire among the students, he needed to act with the utmost discretion, waiting for nightfall once more. In the meantime, he should act as if nothing were amiss. Severus Snape flew silently low under the sky in his bat form, his thoughts still caught up in the unsettling discovery in the sealed tower. The cold air rattled his membranous wings as he descended toward the castle, searching for the path to the girls' bathroom, where the troll alarm had been triggered. He reverted to his human form before entering the torch-lit corridors, smoothing his robes to appear composed. Should anyone question his tardiness, he had an excuse ready: he was replenishing his supplies. However, when he arrived at the girls' bathroom, the scene he found left him momentarily speechless. The place was a battlefield, shattered walls, columns reduced to rubble, and a pungent stench that indicated more than one troll had been present. Not one, but an entire tribe of trolls had invaded the castle, and what remained of them on the walls, floor, and ceiling was evidence of their presence. Despite the chaos, what truly caught his attention was the obvious damage inflicted by devastating explosive magic that had reduced the trolls to mere fragments of flesh and rock. There was no doubt, someone had eliminated them with immense force, using spells of a power rarely seen at Hogwarts. Snape frowned. Who could have done such a thing? The list of possible culprits was short, and his daughter Celine would briefly crossed his mind, but he refused to entertain such a possibility. "This is unheard of!" exclaimed Quirinus Quirrell, who stood there, pale and furious, his incredulous gaze fixed on the remains of the trolls. The Dark Lord within him cursed this failure. Manipulating one troll was easy, but a large group was not, and someone killed them easily. Quirrell stared at the girls' bathroom with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Snape met his gaze coldly, his eyes dark as bottomless pits. "Did it take you long to get here, Severus?" Quirrell asked, in an accusatory tone. Snape narrowed his eyes. The stinking one was too arrogant. "I was minding my own business. Replenishing my supplies, if you ask me. But I see you've done a splendid job. Or someone did." Quirrell looked as if he were about to retort, but he held back. Snape, however, was not about to let it go. He leaned slightly toward the flustered professor. "Do you have any theory about who might have caused this?" he asked in a soft but dangerous voice. No. I am not sure," Quirrell stammered, avoiding her gaze. Acting like the awkward stutterer again. Snape straightened up, his mind still racing. The explosive magic involved was unusual. Someone very powerful was involved, and although he wanted to deny the possibility that his daughter was behind it, the uneasy suspicion lingered. As she surveyed the wreckage of the disaster, one thing was certain: she needed answers, and she would get them, whether people liked it or not, but she would soon discover something that would only give her more questions. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, his usually serene face now etched with disbelief, stood in the center of the wrecked bathroom. His blue eyes scanned every corner of the disaster. Severus Snape watched in silence as the headmaster waved his wand, trying to detect traces of the magic that had caused such devastation. But the results were disconcerting. "This is peculiar, Severus," said Dumbledore gravely, frowning. "There is no evidence of explosive magic whatsoever." Snape narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean, Director?" "Only a weak residual magic remains, but it's not the kind that causes destruction of this magnitude. Whoever is responsible didn't use a conventional spell. If they used magic at all." Snape crossed his arms, his mind racing. If it wasn't magic, then what was it? The chances were slim, and an uneasy suspicion began to form in his mind, though he resisted accepting it. Even though he had rejected his Muggle side years ago, he wasn't unaware that they possessed very powerful and fearsome weapons. Meanwhile, in the room of requirement, Celine Snape Evans moved with determination. Her system, with a soft but neutral voice, responded to her commands. "What do you want, Celine?" "You will be clear," she ordered firmly. "Every time you give me information about a potion or spell, I want the pros and cons, without omitting any details. It was your fault, not mine, that my father discovered me, because that invisibility formula has a fatal flaw that you didn't tell me about until I suffered its effects after bleeding something." "Understood. What would you like to check first?" Celine took a bottle containing a bright amber liquid. "What does this potion do?" "Pros and cons," the system responded as clearly and directly as possible. Celine nodded, coldly assessing the information. "Good. Now you'll help me organize my supplies of potion bottles and ancient books. The shelves I'd set up would soon be overflowing with forbidden ingredients and knowledge. Or perhaps not, since the headmaster had the classified material, but young Snape found certain questionable writings that could be described as obscure." As the system began listing options, Celine smiled with a mixture of cunning and determination. She knew there was something in her blood that made her different, but she also knew she wouldn't rely solely on magic. The nitroglycerin she had used against the trolls was only the beginning of her path toward total mastery of all the arts, magical or otherwise. And finally, the long-awaited night arrived for Severus. Slipping through the shadows as only he knew how, Snape reached one of the castle's hidden exits. His cloak billowed as he activated an ancient vanishing charm, passing through the stone wall and emerging in the grounds outside. With a decisive gesture, he transformed back into his animagus form. The black bat soared into the cold night, flying toward the home of one of his most discreet contacts, Alaric Greaves, a potions master and expert in blood rituals who lived apart from the wizarding world. Snape landed on the porch of the old stone cottage, resuming his human form. He knocked on the door with 3 precise taps. The door opened slowly, revealing a tall man with grey hair and a shrewd look. "Severus, what honor? Or problem?" "Trouble, as always," Snape replied coldly, entering without waiting for an invitation. He took out the blood sample, still fresh on his robe. "I need a lineage test. And it must be discreet." Greaves raised an eyebrow, but asked no questions. "Always discreet, Severus. Always discreet." As the old potions master prepared the ingredients for the ritual, Snape felt a knot form in his chest. What if this confirmed the impossible? What if Celine really was his daughter? What would that mean for his life, his loyalties, and Lily's legacy? Soon, he would get answers. And he was sure that none of them would be easy to accept. The silence in Alaric Greaves's cabin was profound, broken only by the flickering of the candles illuminating the ritual. The old potions master gazed at the parchment before him with an expression he rarely wore, utter astonishment. Severus Snape, impatient, crossed his arms over his chest. "Well?" he growled, his voice heavy with tension. Alaric didn't answer. He simply took the parchment that had appeared from the girl's blood and held it out before Snape. The red lines glowed with a magical light, forming a clear and irrefutable family tree. There was the name Celine Snape Evans, connected by fine lines to Lily Evans and Severus Snape. Snape felt his throat close up. For a moment, he thought the ground was giving way beneath his feet. He murmured, but the parchment didn't lie. Blood never did. The air seemed to have grown thicker. He placed a few galleons on the wooden table, without looking at Alaric. "Thank you," she murmured in a tense voice before turning towards the door. Without another word, he stepped out into the cold night, the parchment still etched in his mind like a curse. He didn't resort to his animagus form this time. Instead, with a graceful, fluid movement, he lifted into the air, soaring silently beneath the starry sky, thanks to the ancient trick Voldemort had taught him so long ago. The cold winds whipped against his face, but Snape barely felt them. His mind was caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. A daughter with Lily? How had this happened without him knowing? Lily had never mentioned a daughter, and as far as he knew, Harry was the only child she'd left behind. But now, Celine existed, and blood was thicker than water. Upon spotting the Hogwarts towers on the horizon, Snape descended smoothly, landing near the hidden entrance he used to discreetly enter the castle. Walking through the dark corridors, his expression hardened. He had many questions and few answers, but one thing was certain, he wouldn't let anyone take this truth from him. Celine Wood, or Celine Snape Evans, was his daughter, and he would find a way to protect her. As he hadn't been able to do with Lily.